have the link. Good.
There he is.
Okay, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we've got a special guest today. Welcome, everybody. And today is Saturday, February 14th. It's 12:03 p.m. Eastern Time, and court is now in session. So,
I hope not.
and Bob, you're the guest of honor, okay?
Oh, okay. Hello.
So,
Court's in session. Bob's busted.
They found me again.
yes, I
Well,
guess
he's judge, jury, and executioner.
yeah. So Bob, I suspect you should be prepared to be heckled by friends of many years during this call,
I
but
hope so.
we will try to maintain good order without civil disturbance. And I suspect everybody knows Bob, or who those of you who don't know Bob know of him. He is not Martin Fleischman or the Memorial Project, but
Well,
I'm glad I let him in first so we could have just a little bit of pre-discussion. Uh, so welcome everybody. This is our every other week meeting of the Zero Point Energy Group, and let's get down to the agenda so we respect everybody's time. I announced the date and recording of the call. And our mission statement is to openly develop and disseminate verified zero point energy technologies for the perpetual benefit of humanity. Just shortened recently, Bob. It was a little longer, but but the summary for your knowledge, the extended summary is that it is not our intent to make money, to profit off this technology. Nobody here gets paid. Nobody will get paid who is in our group unless we choose to pay somebody for administrative work, or there are certain projects that we want to gain intellectual property, and that's discussed amongst the board of directors before any money is spent. But the intent is to come out with a build spec that you could take to contract manufacturers that has been vetted to work, replicated, and safe, and release that build spec to the public domain, period. So if there are 100 companies who want to build it, we have competition, we have a free market. We don't have the greedy bastards doing what they've done in the past. We don't have people disappearing. Bob, do you have any questions about that before we move on?
no, it's very much the ethos of evolabs.io. That is to develop technologies related to, in that case, exotic vacuum objects, which are a name for the activation in these structures, in these systems. And yeah, it's basically create minimum viable products that then can be contract manufactured wherever, fully spec'd out, and then if someone wants to develop IP off that, that's just the same as someone developing IP off the Android operating system, or developing it off the basic internal combustion engine. But the idea is to break, very much, I guess, in line with what you just said, which is to break the walls down, and to overcome the hurdles that have been put in place with Invention Secrecy Act and more, preventing people from creating these technologies for the betterment of humankind and the planet.
Yeah, so I suspect an easy summary would be to create an open source platform for zero point energy, period.
Yeah, well, a lot of that's been done with evolabs.io, in that I don't know if you know about it, but it was a group that was supporting the project, the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project's work for a period of time, and they decided that they might want to monetize some of the technology. And I said, well, I couldn't really support that, but I encourage you to make an open system, and I could definitely get behind that. And support that. So they've done an incredible amount of work. They've done in creating a distributed autonomous organization, and all of you could become part of it if you chose. And essentially, you have collective voting rights on where any resources are spent in terms of funds that might be raised. And then essentially, it goes to proven researchers that have worked openly and are committed to delivering their plans openly. And we've developed a data acquisition technology. A guy called Artifact in Germany. He's an incredible engineer. I think it's probably the best out there in the market. It's free to use, and you can plug in all your different equipment and monitor the data coming off those and broadcast it right to the internet, complete with video streams and so on. That's openly available as one of the applications, and so several people are now starting to use that as a common base because it produces a common data set. But it's actually got experimental protocols built in. So when you design the experiment, you can put it in there, and then as someone wants to replicate that, they can come along and they can basically branch it in a kind of GitHub way, and then they have all of the parameters and so on. But they could use the same data acquisition tool and so on. So yeah, it's very in line. Where that project is focused is essentially most of the technology that delivers most of the benefits from the underlying process are already patent expired technologies. And the problem out there in meat space is that investors only want to get involved with things where you have IP protecting the technology, but the best cavitation systems, the best material processing systems, and so forth, they already exist as patents, but they're being ignored because they've expired. And so the idea is we've identified a whole series of patents that are they look like they work, they make sense. And the idea is to develop those and then make the resource plans for those and the process and everything available for people to have at it and make technological commercial devices from them.
Well, thanks for explaining that. It sounds like a lot of what exists there is are items and things where in process or we've developed ourselves without knowing what already existed. So,
well, this didn't exist until a couple of years ago, and one person, a guy called Charles in the UK, invested a very large amount of money to make the back ends. And I think it's going to go live in a couple of months. But
okay.
like I say, it's got all the back end, and yeah, I mean, the best thing I can suggest is people go and look at the Evo Labs DAO presentations on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project's website. It's an independent organization. I hope that our organization can seek funds from them to support research and development in the future. But you can go and see, and it's extraordinary. And some of the work that you're going to be talking about today, there are already people that are working in aspects of those, and the idea is that everyone can work together. So I think it would be really advantageous for you guys to hook up with the other researchers, and they're all over the world. They're in UK and Canada and in Australia and so on, and they are doing active research. So I think we've got another meeting coming up. I just chair those, but the work's being done by third parties. So.
Well, that sounds something that absolutely merits connection and establishing a mutual bond and just
I hate
knowing
people
what's
wasting
going
life,
on.
and so you should be merging your efforts if you're as as you say, being open, that's what the MFMP has been since the beginning. We've proven that we've walked the walk for 14 years now. But in the case of this Evo Labs DAO, they're taking the work product of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial product, combining it with these patents that have expired, and bringing their own ingenuity. And some of them are brilliant individuals, as I'm sure many of the people, and I know many of the people are, that are in your group. So it's definitely join forces and make a bigger splash, as it were.
Well, that's great, and I know, speaking for myself and speaking for many members of our group, we are all hoping that 2026 is going to be the year that this stuff gets out into public domain. We're that close, but it's like swimming across the English Channel in a fog. Until you get to the other side, you don't know you're there.
Well,
But
I think it needs a collective effort and passion. I've just had a good friend and researcher who played a critical role die this week, and I'm editing and remastering the book of this guy, Takaaki Matsumoto, who I inadvertently, in the project, we replicated his work, and I was able to see him and show him that 1 month before he died, and he'd been largely ignored even by the field. And it's just incredible what the guy has done. I have 200 kilograms of his life's work, and you cannot even begin to imagine the intensity at which he I don't know that, obviously, the present company accepted, but many of the scientists, even in the same field, they're lucky if they read the abstract, let alone even the abstract and the conclusion of any paper that's published by their contemporaries in the same field, going to the same conferences. But I know from looking at this guy's work that he printed every single paper from a proceedings, and he went through line by line, noting and putting comments in every single proceeding paper. And that's even further than I've been able to find time to do. So there's so much reinventing the wheel. It's quite embarrassing. And half the technologies people think they're finding were already found, in at least not what understood, but the what they did was found in the early part of the last century. So. Yeah, it's embarrassing, and I just hate people wasting time. We should be working together.
agree absolutely with everything you just said. And I I think the key is to get some demonstration out into public domain of over unity, no matter what the size, no matter what the over unity is, so that those classical physicists, if you want to call them that, or people sitting in the middle, will just shut the heck up and join us on this journey.
Well,
And with
it's
the
frankly embarrassing, because DARPA have just released a funding call for people to get involved with nature, throwing in some commentary on it, and citing Pons and Fleischmann. And in that DARPA document that was released on late last year, the funding call, they are still saying in the preliminary text that Pons and Fleischmann's claims were extraordinary, and they were never replicated. And yet I've literally read in the last presentation I did but one, and I have the full document from the Matsumoto archive. I have many full documents of full replication at the highest levels, but this is from May the 7th 2001, published by the US Naval Research Laboratories. Melvin Miles went to Hokkaido University here on secondment and ran a Pons and Fleischmann cell, which was designed by Martin Fleischmann, saw excess heat, and it's there in a openly published US Naval Labs report. Yet you've got another part of the US military claiming it's never been replicated. It's farcical. It's totally farcical. So, of course, as we'll probably discuss, cavitation is the fastest way to achieve excess heat. And I've been working with Binjuan Huang, a 50-year professor at Taipei University, who's spent around about, I'd say, $6 to $7 million of Mr. Lin's billionaire money in the largest cavitation systematic study in history for energy production. He's got reactors that typically produce up to about a COP of 2, but have achieved over a COP of 4. This is easily achievable. It was achieved by Kladov in the 1980s. He had 2 patents in Russia. He then did he submitted his patents to the Western world in 1992 at the end of the Cold War. Unfortunately, they were so badly rendered in both the Russian sense and the European Union, although they were awarded in both places, because basically I think the West wanted Russians to pretend that they were going to be getting some IP and some money rolling in, let them patent anything. But anyway, I've deciphered it, and it's completely exactly correct what he's observed. And in that patent, he's reporting a COP of 11.7 in his cavitators, thermal over electrical in. And what we're talking about is a 70 kilowatt electric motor producing 830 kilowatts of thermal heat. We're not talking small amounts of energy here. We're talking, if you can't spot an extra 700 plus kilowatts output, you've got problems with your data acquisition, I would argue. And the addition was adding aluminosilicates, which dissolve in the water. It's basically small fine clay, and that has aluminium and silicon, and they're both incredible fuels in the cavitation process when you understand actually what's going on. And so, direct electrical production, that's been proven. I worked with Dr. George Eagley in Zizi. We walked through a process. He taught me about ball lightning. I gave something back to him. He swore he wouldn't put a patent through, but he did. But that's because he said his sponsors demanded he put a patent. But it's now been verified, and I saw a verification of it in after Tesla Tech last year down in the mountains up in Cloudcroft in New Mexico. And that was producing an electrical output, but although it was running through resistors. So how it was under calibration, you run the input energy through, and it has an input and an output, and you see the thermal temperature rise. You do the calibration, and then you do the sparking essentially, and cut it down to the chase. It was producing above a COP of 3 direct electrical output, and it's using exotic vacuum objects and aluminium as the fuel. Unfortunately, the aluminium gets eaten away and converted into carbon mostly, as was found by Matsumoto and Yul Brown and S.V. Adamenko and whoever else. So we have direct electrical over unity in the energy amplifier of Dr. George Eagley, which is proven now by 3 parties, 2 of which I extremely respect. Over unity is clear in cavitation. As I say, it's the easiest way to do it. And recently we've replicated up in Prague here, Griffin Brock's Desmatron tube. And we have an agreement with the Griffin Brock to produce those in Europe, and one of our associates is going to produce them in Canada. But the important thing is, with that replication that was done just over a week ago, we weren't using a off-the-shelf 1920s diathermy unit, which are not readily available for everyone. The power driving circuit was built from scratch. This means it's the first fully from scratch replication of Tesla's shadow graphs. Now, I predicted that this was the same emission type radiation as was observed by Ivan Filimonenko in palladium deuterium boiling water reactor. He called it warm fusion in 1957. It was at 1150 degrees centigrade. But this produced massive overunity in thermal, but they also observed a strange emission of radiation that changed the half-lives of radioactive isotopes, and also shielded from radiation. So I speculated that this radiation would remediate radioisotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90. And in an initial test, with a 12 minutes exposure, in the case of strontium-90 and yttrium-90 isotope, standard check sources, we were looking at acceleration in decay half-life of 330,000 times. And most of them were over sort of in the 50, 60, 70,000 times acceleration. So we're going to be doing a lot more testing on that, but this will enable us to facilitate fission and fusion, because that produces radioactive waste, and thorium cycle, because that produces radioactive waste. A method by which you can decontaminate, for instance, soils and so on. And what that does is it frees up known technologies for producing massive amounts of base load from the potential risk of a failure. And that means you can make much smaller reactors, which obviously when they fail, and they're designed now to fail safe, but even if something untoward happened and they failed badly, that the zone in which you would need to clean up would be much smaller, and we would have the tools to clean it up extremely quick, which means the mental barriers that are stopping these technologies from completely replacing baseload around the world are removed. And it's all the same technology, the same underpinning process that's driving all of these over unity things is effectively a form of static electricity. In fact, it is static electricity, and everyone, mostly because of ego, has come up with some name for it, whether it's Erzions or ectons or exotic vacuum objects or radiant matter or radiant energy or whatever. I mean, you name it, they've all got a name for it.
So, Bob, quick question. I participated with with Brendan Darrier's group, the subquantum kinetics, and we talk a lot about Ken Shoulders, et cetera, and Paul LaViolette, et cetera. Would you equate the radiation you're talking about to the same radiation that killed Ken Shoulders? Is there a safety issue with working with the plasmoids?
So, these structures are ubiquitous. They're absolutely ubiquitous. But they tend to live in the low to medium range of what Alexander Shishkin, Karols, and Dubovik, before he died, called energy solitons. The high energy solitons are produced where you have any form of spark, discharge, or any extreme impact, any radioactive material, emitting high energy particles or photons. Right. They will produce the high energy solitons, which will ultimately decay to low energy solitons. Low and medium energy solitons are basically critical for life and processes. So they are a good thing. It's the high energy solitons and the breakdown of those which can produce, in my view, what are called coherent matter traveling waves. And so there's two aspects to this. So like the way I look at the desmotron tube is that the desmotron tube is producing an amount of energy solitons, which may actually be high energy solitons. Now, if this bears out to be true, normal X-rays, when you look at a normal X-ray, you're looking at 30 to 70 keV in terms of the photonic energy. And every single one of those will potentially damage every single cell that they pass through, right? There's a interaction rate and there will be some level of damage. What I believe is going on, and I can go into the electrodynamics and the magic of it all, but essentially what you have is you have a donut and you have a vortex, okay? And let's say it's a bigger vortex. As this energy soliton passes through matter, it can be partially absorbed, particularly if the material is ferromagnetic or paramagnetic. That's not the case with your blood unless it's deoxygenated. So your deoxygenated blood is paramagnetic, so it can get trapped in the body as well. But then as it passes through radioactive material and it goes into the phase singularity in the center, if it's spun up enough, then the magnetic strength, it's like a Kerr-Newman black hole in there. The magnetic strength can be such that, and the vacuum is different in the whole bubble. It's a different vacuum state, that radioactive material instantly falls apart. The thing about radioactive material is it already wants to fall apart, right? That's why it's radioactive. It's telling you.
It's dissipative. Yeah.
Now, John Hutchison would say that he's accelerating time. Well, kind of he is, but that's only because you take radioactive material like rubidium-87 or cesium-137 as the count rate for an atomic clock, and it should take this amount of time to decay. As this passes through, every atom that is radioactive that is in that passes through the center zone of this neutral structure as it goes through is magnetically encouraged to just accelerate its decay. And so it doesn't work with, well, it can do, it just needs to be higher. It tends to work with beta particles first, because the actual energy level to force that decay is much lower than it is to cause an alpha particle to come off a alpha isotope, and also the role of relic neutrinos. So the risk in terms of humans in this area are first from these particles, the energy solitons passing through the body. What does that cause? Well, principally it causes the decay potentially of 1 in every trillion carbon atom in your body, which happens to be carbon-14. And then the other is the potassium-40. But when you look at the physicality of the actual body, we're almost entirely water, and that's H2O. So none of those are going to be affected, right? But every cell that would have any elements in there would be affected by a photon from an X-ray. So we need to verify this by lots of study, and this is why we want to make the desmetron available to everyone to be able to study, because in my view, you're studying the actual form of radiation that does most of the magic. Okay. So then the second thing is, when these are highly energized, they can pick up ions. And the ions can be effectively, they lose their mass and they can be transported into your body, and then they can blow up. And what Shishkin, Kurolz, and Dubovik discovered, and this was over 9 years of research from 2009 to when they presented in 2019, is that when the overall cluster can break up, there's two things that can be damaging. One, the electrons can come out and they can be up to 10 keV in kinetic energy, which means that they can themselves produce X-rays of up to 10 keV, typically if they're passing through heavy matter. There's not a lot of breaking radiation when you're going through water, but let's say you happen to have a titanium implant, or not even a titanium implant, maybe you had a piece of, I don't know, tungsten jewelry, and they went into that. You might be able to get some X-rays out of that. The second thing is that the particles that come out, what they established by where they impacted these clusters with photographic film, they saw under the birdies where these things break up, and there's some people that are saying, and it might be the case, that these are actually kind of like pinch marks on the film. But that aside, there are these impact craters on the cellulose. And what they've established is, as they pass these energy clusters through different elements, they grab the nuclei and they transport those, they teleport those, as Ken Scholzes would say. And when they interact with the silver and they get excited and they break up in the photographic emulsion, the nuclei come out and they leave these craters, and they can, with two different constants, they can determine the width and the depth of the craters based on the atom's nuclei that they are carrying. And they can do this reliably and repeatedly, which means that, and what they calculated is that the impact from these particles when they fly out from the breaking structure is such that it will cause red blood cells to be damaged, destroyed, and it can cause white blood cells to be genetically damaged because of just the kinetic impact of these structures. And so now there's one last component. When the energy cluster breaks up, it has, if it's spun up enough, it will have, in my view, coherent matter waves in the core. And when these coherent matter waves emerge, they come out as a coherent matter traveling wave. And then they hit the normal vacuum state, and then they collapse into ordinary matter, which may not be the matter that it started as. And it may be a spread of matter. And these can come out with, they're like little, very, very small needles. And these may even be the pinpricks that Tesla was finding he was feeling when he was even behind a metal or a glass sheet, when he was testing elements above aluminium in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I'll show you something, and this is the first time I publicly showed this, so it's where is it? It might be behind me. Because Matsumoto was absolutely convinced that these processes were occurring in volcanoes and earthquakes, and he's one of a long stream of people that have considered that most of the elements are actually made in the earth. But the arguments that he made are very compelling because, and this is the first time anyone's seen this, that what he observed under the microscope in so-called cold fusion experiments, which we could call coherent energy transformation experiments, he actually observed the same phenomena captured in volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. And so I'm just going to show you a couple of images here. If I can find them. Yeah. Where is it? This was from Mount Uzu eruption. And I hope I've got the image I want to show you. Convenient, but maybe I haven't. And I will be putting this as part of my presentation at the upcoming conference, so in Italy. So I don't know if you can see, this is the plan for Mount Uzu eruptions and where he placed detectors. This is a never before seen picture of Matsumoto pointing to having the mountain in the background that erupted, and here, this is the detector plate. So he had nuclear emulsions there and some metal plates. And they were in a package here. So you've got nuclear emulsions and metal plates. And these are, for me, the money shots, because he saw exactly the same kind of structures in cold fusion experiments. So this is a stitched together photographic. So he would get a microscope, and he would use the microscope to look at the nuclear emulsions. And this is an explosion of what he calls microball lightning, which is an energy soliton. And here you can see a coherent matter traveling wave coming out of it. Okay?
My God.
And here, these are two that collided and disrupted each other. This is amazing. So these are two that they blew up, and one sent a coherent matter traveling wave out this way, and it's a vortex spiral that comes out. And there's one coming out, the other one the other way. Right?
Now we got to modify Feynman's diagrams, right?
Well, I can walk you through exactly how I see all of these things sitting together. I feel the luckiest guy in the world to firstly have met Matsumoto and to have these things. And before he died, he spoke to my Japanese translator and friend show. He said, Bob's going to find some very interesting things in my documents. And so there is a 1998 or 1999 Max Planck patent, which is based on trapping and forming a coherent matter. And then they release the trapping, and they have a coherent matter wave coming out. And the actual front image is like a braided beam that comes out. And we've literally caught these things on video from blowing up ball lightning structures. And this is how big it can get. Matsumoto has a photo, and then Sho sent me one later that is a more recent earthquake. They actually come out and you can see them coming into the sky. And the one in Matsumoto's work literally looks like the pinhole camera of an Evo disrupting. If you remember, it's got like, it comes out as a line, you can see it's twisting, and then it splits up into two, and then they dissipate, right? And that is literally what it looks like, but in the sky, in going up to kilometers height, and it's literally as above, so below. It's scale invariant, and this is coming out of the ground before an earthquake. So what we're looking at is a process is utterly ubiquitous. It's reliant on charge clustering, static electricity, and the Shishkin, Karols, and Dubovik, and I spoke about this for the first time in detail in my Tesla Tech presentation. They argue that every atom is not just a nucleus and an electron or a number of electrons. It is a nucleus, an energy soliton, and a number of electrons. And that the energy soliton itself contains 9.79 or something times 10 to the 10, which is approximately 1 times 10 to the 11 electronic vortices. And that if they are disrupted, they can produce these exotic vacuum. If they're disrupted, they can produce real electrons. But unfortunately, they don't have any kinetic energy, so they freeze anything that when they're blowing up. It's like it literally is cold electricity, because they are in a coherent state, and it is this energy soliton that is able to capture energy from the relative neutrino condensates at 1.95 Kelvin and maintain the spin of the electrons. This is what Hal Puthoff would call the ground state of the hydrogen atom. It's where he's saying that the 0 point energy is coming from. There must be a carrier for all that photonic energy that's basically making it all homogeneous in the environment. And one of those carriers is the energy contained within the relative neutrino condensate. And that this overall soliton can breathe this material. And in fact, all matter breathe. And what they found in this research they've been doing in Dubna, which is the nuclear city in Russia, is that all elements can release this, what they call hidden energy within matter. But it's 2,000 to 4,000 times easier to release it from hydrogen isotopes. So yes, by doing a massive disruptive discharge into aluminium, Tesla was able to create these from aluminium. You can't really get an intensely enough discharge to do it from things beyond aluminium. And with what Tesla was working on, of course, with the SV-Adamenko system, they were making incredibly intense electrical discharges, and they were able to create every element in the periodic table 20,000 times in a row from any metal that they put in. And essentially what you're doing is you're releasing these things, and then once they're out, you need to hit them with what is the binding energy of the electronic vortices in there, which Ken Shoulders specified and calculated is 2,000 electron volts of energy, 2 kilo electron volts. So that is the binding energy of the coherent electrons that are in there. And so you must smack these things so you release them and then you smack them again. So to answer your question, I wouldn't want these particular coherent matter waves going through me, and they would feel like needles. And we've actually seen collapsed coherent matter waves, and it's amazing because I showed one in 2022 in Azizi in my presentation there. It's like a diamond braid. If you can imagine an open braid of diamond, and you can see where it started to deposit the coherent matter wave, and it's ran out of matter inside the coherent condensate. So but that whole thing can travel, and it can travel like a bullet. So, and it's physically quite large. And so, I worry that these technologies, and this is why I'm so passionate about getting the understanding out there so that people can realize practical technologies that are useful for humans rather than the weapons that clearly have been developed from it. So using phase conjugated arrays of these, you can stimulate with sound or for photons you can't see, coherent matter things, and it's going to smash up your blood cells, it's going to mush your brain, it's going to cause no blood to come out. If you have sufficient amount of these, it's going to paralyze you. It's going to freeze you in place. And so I think it was used recently in the takeout of Maduro. Everything there seems like, oh God, they really are starting to deploy it. And it's just sad because practical applications of these technologies in a positive way can deliver all of the things that they say that we need and people desire and energy. So like, so that, yes, there's risks. So the risks come from the small amount of potential forced decay of carbon-14 and potassium-40 in the body. The actual payloads that can be carried by these structures as they go through material, they will take on ions. I mean, if they break up in your body, they will shoot them out like atomic bullets, right? The electrons and the up to 10 keV electrons that they can produce, because if you've got a 10 keV energy electron, it's going to produce up to 10 keV X-rays maximally. And the coherent matter wave beams as these clusters break up, and they basically throw out this coherent matter wave, which can also occur in your body. Now, the first way that you can best protect yourself is in Matsumoto's book, and in many other parties. So Leonid Orytskiev, he was working as a chief mainstream physicist during the time of the Chernobyl disaster. And he led the team that made the Gamma camera. So this used the world's biggest helicopter, and it was a 2-ton camera. And because Gamma's basically goes through everything and you can't see it, they had to create this quantum lens. It's like the reverse of what you have to do to screen microelectronics. So people think, oh, we got a tin laser here and we're producing these UVs and we're able to project and make this mask on a piece of semiconductor. Well, what the mask looks like is nothing like the actual track it makes on the silicon. It's actually a quantum interference where the light would then, at the focal point, create the actual discrete lines. Well, what Leonid Orytskiev had to do was to work in reverse. So the photons are coming out as gamma rays, and he has literally a thing that looks like a what do you call it? A triskeligon. What is it called? Triskeligon. It's something like it's an old like Celtic symbol where you got 3 legs, but it's actually like 3 combs, so that they could actually image it. Now, why was he interested? Well, because, and I've translated part of this. I regularly meet with the Russians, and what they found was during Chernobyl, using this camera, they found no core anywhere. The core had disappeared. It hadn't melted through. It wasn't China syndrome. They dug underneath it, right? He knows people that did that. There was no radioactive core underneath. What he found was these extremely light, pure carbon RBMK moderator bricks. They're meant to be pure carbon. Some had somehow got out of the core, lifted a 2,000-ton lid. It's gone up into the sky and landed a long way away and hadn't broken. That was weird. Then many of the people that went in there observed these big balls of light moving around inside the reactor. Large chunks of water flow pipes had blown themselves off the wall, not by an explosion, by magnetic repulsion, in his opinion. He saw large pieces of metal in the reactor moved from some parts of the reactor into another part of the reactor when there was no conceivable way that they could have moved from one part of the reactor to the other. There was no hole that they could have gone through. They were just there in where they were placed, and they were in another part of the reactor. There were also large metal beams which were intersected with each other without bending or melting. So basically, Hutchison effect, but on a very, very large scale. And so that's when he thought, well, mainstream physics absolutely cannot explain this. So he started investigating the field of cold, what they called cold transmutation of nuclei and ball lightning. Okay, and he did an experiment in the early 2000s where he took a titanium foil and he detonated it, and it produced outside of this water-filled reactor, outside of the polymer, outside of the metal, a ball lightning above. And a few microseconds later, that broke up into thousands of little, tens of thousands of little microball lightning. And he got it on with a mirror from above. With one camera, you can see above with a 45-degree mirror and directly. And then at 0.7 of a meter, he had some iron 57 sheets on which, like, so you've got the reactor in the center here, one here and one over here. Okay, and then on the back of this, he had a North Pole ferrite magnet. On the back of that, he had a South Pole ferrite magnet. And he had another iron 57 sheet in another room. And what he found was that in each of the cases, the iron 57 sheets, where it had a north, it was one way on its NMR, magnetic resonance. And in the other one, it was the other way. And on the control, it was right where it should be. He found that in 2000s, that whatever these things that were coming out that also produced the same tracks as Ken shoulders, and the things that I showed you were produced by an earthquake, a volcano erupting. He found that these things bound to the magnet, and that they were both north and south magnetic monopoles, effectively. And they would bind to iron. Now, in Matsumoto's book, he found that in his experiments, he had these things that would go through the water, through the glass, through the air, through the nuclear emulsion packaging, through one of the nuclear emulsions, and then would bounce around and leave tracks on some of the nuclear emulsions that he had in a stacked array. What he found was only with iron, because he used things like gold, lead, nickel, palladium, copper, and so on in his electrodes, he found that only with iron did he see them leave ring deposits on the iron. And he was clever enough to immediately dry it out and put it under the SEM. And what he found is that these ring deposits would then decay over 2 days, which, by the way, is exactly the length of time that the magnetic field constant in the iron 57 was skewed either one way or the other in the Eretskiev experiments. He would find that these would then decay over 2 days and leave newly synthesized elements that were not in the original material. Okay? Now, this 2-day signature, in my view, is the virial stability of an exotic vacuum object when it is not continually either fed electrons or spun electromagnetically. And so they can survive for about 2 days with the natural energy that they get from the flux of the environment. So like an ordinary atom keeps its stability indefinitely in our vacuum state, these particular structures are only able to maintain their stability for up to 2 days. And then they start falling apart. So they're metastable vacuum objects that are not stable permanently in our ordinary vacuum state. And that is why they are exotic vacuum objects.
So
and
quick
the smaller
question.
they are, the more stable they are.
Yeah, quick question. You know, we've studied the non-dissipative and non-radiative aspects of the plasmoids. And Ken Shoulders studied it as well. We need 1 × 10⁻¹1 electrons basically to create a cluster. You already mentioned that. And, you know, Richard Feynman struggled with the idea initially, as you're well aware, and he wrote Ken Shoulders a letter and apologized and all for that, because he couldn't understand how the Coulomb force didn't blow the damn thing apart. So what is it in the terms of phenomenology that holds 1 × 10⁻11 electrons together as a coherent, in this case, plasmoid, toroidal plasmoid mass? What is it about the toroid, unique sacred geometry? We'll leave the metaphysics out for just a minute here. But what is it, in your opinion, instinctive, gut feel, inference, whatever, that creates this non-dissipative structure and holds it together for 2 days?
Can I share a presentation?
It's up to Matt.
Can I down here I can see a key.
Yeah, well, listen, this is going much further than we anticipated, but I can't for the life of me stop what's going on. So I would appreciate you continuing, and I apologize to the members of our group for my dissipating from what I said we would keep to the agenda, but I don't want to lose this opportunity, guys. So I beg your indulgence.
All right, so I'll share.
I anticipated it.
I'm sure you did.
You get Bob going. It don't stop.
Can you see what I'm showing here?
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually part from my TeslaTech presentation. Maybe I can do it full screen here. Is that clear for you guys?
Yes.
Okay. So, steps to the discovery of electronuclear collapse. Far in the universe, nuclear collapses very often take place by the gravitational force after stars consume their fuel. Since electromagnetic force is about 40 orders stronger than gravitational force, it should be easy to induce similar nuclear collapses by the electromagnetic force in laboratory. But we never knew until now how to do that. Recently, the author discovered a nuclear collapse which was induced by electromagnetic force in laboratory during the study of mechanisms of so-called cold fusion phenomena. Several kinds of nuclear reaction were directly induced by the electromagnetic force called electronuclear reactions, and they were found to so far occur in a special state of hydrogen clusters, which he calls itonic clusters or micro-ball lightning. The nuclear collapse was one of the most remarkable reactions among electronuclear reactions, called electronuclear collapse. ENCs, furthermore, very amazingly, simply completely broken materials by ENC were found to be regenerated again to thin tubes and films of conventional elements such as carbon, oxygen, and iron. The latter process was called electronuclear regeneration. And you can see the magnetohydrodynamic structures on the outside of this overall toroidal collapsed lead bubble that is here. And there's many of them on the outside. And he calls them in his work eddies, which is not too far from the truth. So he says something occurs, things to go into a point, and you have a point of electronuclear collapse, and this ultimately leads to an explosion of what he calls a black hole and the generation of a carbon film around that. But there's a wormhole that comes out, which is a vortical thing, and it leads to the synthesis of these other elements from whatever elements you start with. The bibliography here, I would refer you to this replication of 1976 work, where they quote in 2021, this was funded by US Department of Energy, UK, European Union, China, Japan, South Korea. I think even Brazil was involved with this. It's a very big study. You can see the magnetohydrodynamic structure vortex on this plane. You can see the ring spot that you get here. Everything that you see red in this single laser pulse into a nonlinear plasma is 1.36 thousand Teslas of magnetic field strength. Of course, if we went into the center of that, it would be even stronger. But this is not a resonant phenomenon, it's a single pulse. But you can see there is a point in here, which is what I call the phase singularity, where the same strength comes into a point into a dead stop. And that is where the magic happens. Now, on the boundary of the magnetohydrodynamic...
Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're just seeing one slide, the original slide.
Oh, okay.
So
let me just see. Can you see it now? Right.
Yeah.
This is what. So this was the second one with the black hole, and so on, and this is the third one here. And essentially, on the boundary here, on the boundary of the magnetohydrodynamic, this torus that we're talking about, the electric charge separation is 3.2 or 3.6 thousand Tesla. It's positive million volts per meter. So it's minus 1.8 million volts per meter and plus 1.8 million volts per meter. And essentially, in my view, the boundary on the torus here can strip all of the electrons and fully ionize atoms. And I think this explains the coronal temperature over the sun problem with solar ejections and so forth. Now, Dubovik, who I talked about earlier, discovered what's called the toroidal moment. Inside a toroid, you get the Aharonov bomb effect. This allows for phase synchronization of matter. This is where you get your coherence. And at the Moscow Nuclear Physics Institute, in water flow plasma discharges, so this probably mixes in many of the topics and research angles that your group does. They say that the monopole-like structures that they see forming that produce long-lived luminous objects, including toroidal plasmas that last for, drumroll, 2 days, glowing on a piece of metal after the experiment is concluded, which they video recorded, they say is probably explained by the topological Dirac-compliant monopole as presented in 2008 by R.P. Wisniewski at the Sochi conference. And essentially what happens is electrons, because of your Aharonov bomb effect in the overall magnetohydrodynamic structure, are put into phase coherence in pairs, becoming Cooper pairs, and they wind themselves down into basically a Kerr-Newman black hole magnetic singularity, producing a magnetic core. And this is what binds every part of the structure together. And it's the problem that most people thought, and this is the same with Lord Kelvin, they were only ever thinking about one toroid. They weren't thinking about a toroid making of toroids. And in fact, when you make a wheel made of wheels minimally, like this electrodynamic structure here, you end up with a virial solution where it stabilizes itself and produces its own non-radiating boundary. So what am I talking about? I'm talking electric current going round in a loop produces a magnetic vector. You take 2 or more of those, there's 4 in this diagram here. If you put 4 of them round in a loop, you get what's called a toroidal moment. And these can link together using their toroidal moments in what's called in the West a hypertoroidal moment, but in Russia they call it supertoroidal moment. I call it a fractal toroidal moment because it makes more sense to me. We observe these in experiments. We observe them transmuting matter. That's basically hydrodynamics. I can't go into all this. You can see any number of presentations. But the key to unlocking this was really a deep observation of one Hutchison aluminium sample, where I found 4 quantization levels of these structures, with the upper quantization level in the aluminium leaving a footprint of 48 divisions impressed into the aluminium. And then one with a number, and then you can see the core of the apple going through. It basically led to this structure being established. And then we found out that they could leave these marks in our experiments of various different scales. And this was the same thing that was observed by Winston Bostick and Nardi in 1980 in their plasmoid research. And we found the collapse wave functions of these things, and that led the Russians to throw in the towel and provide us with this work in Russian, which I translated. And everything that I described in 2020 was already in this 1995 paper published in the Biology of Life journal. And essentially, you've got current loop, magnetic field, a loop of magnetic loops, and then a loop of loop of loop. And this is where the 0 point comes in, because when you have when you have a power going through a wire, you get the pointing vector comes off, the energy dissipates. When it's going through a coil, same thing happens. When it's going through a coil of a coil, same thing happens. But when you have a coil of a coil of a coil, the pointing vector closes into a loop. When you have a coil of a coil of a coil of a coil, the pointing vector closes into a loop, and then there's one closed pointing vector orthogonal to that. And this produces what they call in Russia an electromagnetic phantom, and this can capture photons from the environment according to their understanding. So any photons you have are be able to be caught. And so a basic wheel of a wheel structure, I derived the facts from the ball lightning cutting this copper pipe. And you always find the magic occurring right on the boundary layer. So on this one where it hit the silicon dioxide, the fused quartz, we have the torus in the middle, we have the non-radiating boundary, and we have a fuzzy zone around the outside. It's fuzzy zone around the outside. Fuzzy, this is a 4-order structure. When I'm looking at the boundary here, this is where you see the microball lightning. This is the same microball lightning that came away from the collapsed virial solution of the macroball lightning in the Leonid-Orytskev experiments that I talked about earlier. The microball lightning are self-similar to the major structure. They are, in my opinion, either synthesized or aggregated by the major structure. And around them, you can see a 2-order structure, a 3-order structure, a 4-order structure, 5, 6, 8. And these are self-similar structures of different subdivision levels. But the 4-order structure, the 4-4 structure, is the first time that the power of God comes under control, according to the ancient Sumerians. And it looks like this. And so you have 4, 4, 4, 4, making a 4. And it's encoded in so much ancient art. I know you didn't want to get into the esoterics, but you can't deny it exists. That's the non-radiating boundary. The non-radiating boundary is the same non-radiating boundary that you get with a proton and an electron. It makes it a physical particle, except they expel fields. Here it is represented in Coptic Christian artwork. This is above this one. You have the alpha and omega. Every aspect of this is one of the most important scientific documents in the ancient world. This is from this is thousands of years old, or 1,600 years old. This is older. This is from about 600 BC from Macedonia. This is Chi Rho. This is the Delphic epsilon. You have represented one vortex here and a counter vortex here. This produces the ring going around the center where the center points are, and this is the vector through the center, which is the toroidal moment. So that is representing a wheel within a wheel within a wheel structure. That is the ball lightning coin. This is called the thunderbolt coins. Okay, and thunderbolt is the most powerful weapon in most of the ancient religions, whether you're looking at Thor's Ukon Vasara in Scandinavia, you're looking at the thunderbolt of Zeus, or you're looking at the Vrajra. So without recognizing that this is what it is, and that it is inherent throughout the universe, and all sentient beings will understand this ultimately, you're not really telling the whole story. So here is the Tesla logo next to an image I took of the Ukon Vasara, the Thor's hammer in Helsinki's National Museum. This is 1,600 years old, representing the most powerful thing in the universe. This is the Tesla logo, right? And this is the Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, showing that Tesla absolutely knew that this is the secret. And this is what we're up against. We're not just up against people that don't want people to understand magnetohydrodynamics and fractal structure of those things. It's literally root level access. It's hacking the way the universe works. And some people work this out. And, so here, this is German work in cavitation. And so you have a phase singularity here and a phase singularity here. This is essentially exactly the same as the spiral galaxy imaged by James Webb Telescope. And over here on the right, you've got one of these little spirals here, and another one here, another one here, another one here. So this is a wheel, and these two wheels make this wheel, and these two wheels make this wheel, and those two make a wheel. This is in cavitation, just using sound in water. And this is why cavitation processes work. And so I predicted in 2022, 28th of September 22, that this axial hypertoroidal moment paper actually gives us what we would expect to see in cavitation processes. So what we're seeing here is the phase space relationship of a toroidal moment up to 0.9. And so you get an apple shape here. And this is what, again, in the West, they call it a hypertoroidal moment. I call it fractal toroidal moment. And depending on your electric field, you have metastable states where the magnetic vortex is one way and the magnetic vortex is the other way. And you can switch between states with the electric field. I said that we would see this in cavitation systems. I presented this again in late 2023 to Bintran Huang in Taipei. He gave me a sample on the 29th of December 2023. I was able to get the funds together to analyze it in 2024 in March, and we found thousands and thousands of these structures, exactly as predicted. That a hypertoroidal, or in my case, a fractal toroidal structure would produce. So basically, this is the yin, this is the yang. Inside a yin, you have a yin and a yang, and inside the yang, you have a yang and a yin. That's how it works. Here is the magnetohydrodynamic structure. It's exactly and precisely an apple. It has an apple core of the tornado of the vortex that goes in. And the boundary here has a binding energy and an intensity where nothing can stop it burrowing in. This is what bores holes through materials and so on, because the actual binding is all coherent matter. What you're seeing is a coherent matter wave collapsed function here. So you're seeing the aftermath of the process. And this is what drives cavitation. So when I'm going to, in the next frame, I'm going to show the same 20 microns here in the next frame, except I'm not going to change this overlay. I'm just going to change its orientation so you can see the virial solution of the substructure. So you can see the substructure, the wheel that was in this overall wheel would be these two half-sized wheels. And if we go there, we see here exactly and precisely. And we go down to the next one, we see exactly and precisely. And what's happening here is where you see material coming out, this one is still moving. This one's still moved, and this one is still moving. If I go to the next frame, this is moving. Why? Because these are the yin. That's a yin, and that is a yin. The yang is disassembling matter, so it doesn't have any matter in it when it dies. but the yin has an intense amount of coherent matter. So when the electrodynamics dies, then it can spit out its material. So the yin is always functioning after the yang. The yang served its purpose to feed the yin. This is literally how all nature works, right? And it's in all of the ancient texts. You just have to bother to read it. Like I say, no one bothers to read anything. Here is your apple. This was the virial solution that collapsed into the surface. Now, it died, but its progeny, its two internal things came out afterwards. Okay, why? Because this is stable for longer than this. So when I say you can have these exotic vacuum objects come into your body, they can die in your body and give out the substructures. Just like the ball lightning in Ritskevi's experiment gave out substructures. Here is one which I think is just beautiful. I love this image because a large one crashed into here, the outer structure went away, and everything you can see in here it's just beautiful. Here's the overall electrodynamics. From the point of destruction here, because this is a golden ratio vortex that comes into the phase singularity, and it's the same on every fractal level, by the way. As it's coming in here, the vacuum energy state is the gradient is getting more and more intense in. So as it starts to decay material and literally consume it. This is the mouth on the human body. So the human body is a vortex, anti-vortex, Sothic triangle. It goes in there. The point of destruction is this bit below the lip. But if you open your mouth, that's where your food goes in. It's the same place as your belly button. We are made in the image of the technology that runs the universe. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And people have to get over their rejection and revulsion of finding out how actually things work. When you have the coherent matter in here and the overall electrodynamics collapses, it forces out the two structures which were in here. So I call these fat Oreos. So these were originally in this structure. Okay. If we go on, you can see that the top of the apple to the center of the vortex is X. And from the center of the vortex to the point of destruction is 1.618. So this is not only a golden ratio vortex into the phase singularity at every fractal level. Every fractal level of each of the apples of the substructures is the golden ratio. And this is why matter is like this, and why it has to be done this way to be optimal. You cannot improve upon perfection. And this is how the root level access works. Now, the amazing thing is that this is a yang, so it hasn't disrupted. This is a yin, it disrupted, and it gave birth to a male and a female. Okay? This is the male yin of the wheel within this wheel, which was in this wheel. This is the yang rather. This is the yin. The yin carried on moving and just left a shadow of itself. So we have a yin in a yin in a yin yang. We have a yang in a yin yin yang. We have a yang in a yin yang. It's just so amazing.
So Bob, would you equate this description to black and white EVOs in a macro sense?
Yes. And in fact, in a thunderstorm, in a tornado, you will see two zones moving around minimally. And one of them will be white and glowing, and these are the ones on the outside, and the other one will be black. And I can show you a video from one of these, I don't know, disaster programs they get it completely wrong. They think there's a UFO in there, but it's just silly because they don't understand how it's actually working. And sometimes you can get a glow in the core. And anything that's emitting a lot of light will be a yang structure, but it immediately dies when the electrodynamics fails. The yin gives birth. It's what you are seeing here. And Ken Shoulders said, exotic vacuum objects, they kind of like alive. They kind of breed, they split, they absorb things from their environment. They have a community together. They are literally a form of life. And what you're seeing doing the work in Bin Zhenhuang's cavitating reactors are literally a form of life. They are magnetic flux capacitors. The matter goes into the core, into the subcores, into the sub-subcores ad infinitum, down to 1 micron, which appears to be the minimum virial solution. Why? Because you need a minimum structure that is able to maintain a certain magnetic field strength to be able to continue to feed itself. Okay? And that is about 1 micron. That's the minimum structure you can, and that's literally on Ken Shoulders' 1992 patent, right? He's exactly correct.
Yeah, 1 times 10 to the 11th. Yeah.
No, that's the number of electrons that come out of an exotic vacuum object, between 10 to the 9, 10 to the 11. the actual size of a basic Evo, the cell unit, is around about 1 micron. And when you do the electrodynamics, the mathematics, it works out that that is the size that you need of charged material to be orbiting to create a core that has the magnetic field strength to cause color disconfinement of baryons in order that it can feed from the environment or from anything. Literally anything is its food. And so a ball lightning like this, it has the helical vortex that comes up. This is the mouth, exactly as you said. This is the caduceus in ancient lore. It goes round in a particular way into the head of the caduceus, as represented again on Macedonian coins. And it's for transportation and commerce, of course. This is the ball, which is exactly the radius here, and it's come out, and this is the material that's spewing out, okay? This would be a yin, okay? Over here, you've got a structure coming out. This is the substructure. There's another one that's orbiting around here. Here's another one that blew up: iron oxide, silicon dioxide, carbon oxide. That is exactly what was observed in the ball lightning signature, which you can see in physical review letters and on what do you call it? Anyway, the signature that you're looking for in your experiments to know you've had success is an iron-rich crenellated microsphere. This is the iron-rich crenellated microsphere split in half in the 2003 patent of SV Adamenko from Proton 21 Labs, which was, the whole lab was moved over to Illinois. It was verified by George Miley, and it's now become part of the fusion program. This is pure 5-9s copper, and this iron came from a pure 5-9s copper. And it has a hollow area, and in 2005 in a Ukrainian newspaper, SV Adamenko stated that he thought the reaction occurred in this hollow area by way of dark matter. This is the only SEM placed into that 2003 patent. This is because this is the most important thing in that patent. Here, this was produced in an electrical discharge cold fusion experiment. This was produced in a microwave reactor of George Eagley. This was produced in ultrasound, a $35 ultrasonic cleaner run for 900 seconds, transmuting aluminium into iron and silicon and so forth. It's hollow. The ratio between this skin is 1 to 1.618. It's literally everywhere, the golden ratio. It's hilarious. This is from Malcolm Bendel's thunderstorm generator, which reforms carbon and seemingly does transmutation by having a vortex and an anti-vortex in its system. There is an iron-rich crenellated sphere. It is also hollow. This is from Binjuan Huang's cavitation reactors. They do not rust because they are a special form of iron. And here it is, an iron-rich crenellated microsphere in this heat-producing reactor. Now, if you look inside the broken one from inside this cavitation reactor, you have material in there. This is the material that's being reborn in Matsumoto's core. It spits out this material. Here it is. This is in a plasma reactor, a Vega reactor from my good friend Henk Urian, which we are currently replicating in Prague. It's absolutely amazing. This is carbon and oxygen predominantly. Carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen are the things that mostly come out of inside of the sphere, regardless of the elements you start with. This is the flower of life. The flower of life in Sumerian tree of life is literally the fleur de lis with a torus around it and the three things coming out. That's at the tip. That's where the fruit, this is the fruiting body, right? They are exactly and precisely representing the electrodynamics that causes this, okay? And all of the elements that predominantly come out of here are the elements in your body, regardless of the elements you start with. The interesting thing, there's two tori coming out of here. And just like you'll see in a minute, there's other tori. This matter is born. This is here is predominantly 21%. 21% is titanium, other than the carbon and oxygen. Okay, there's hydrogen. You can't detect it on SEM, but hydrogen will be produced in this process as well from whatever element you start with. So hydrogen, carbon, oxygen. That's basically plant life and animal life, in mostly, right? That's most of what we are. And so this is literally the flower of life. This is from Binjuan Huang's apple, one of those apple structures I was showing earlier. All of this material came from the inside of this. So my 5-year-old kid could work out, when she was 8, she could work out that this was impossible to fit all this material inside here, right? So a child can work it out at the age of 8. Therefore, this must be coherent when it's inside here. There's no other choice. You can make up any other theory about how this gets coherent, but it is coherent. And the beautiful thing about this experiment is just copper oxide on here. This is all stellar synthesis coming from the inside of here. And what do you have in the reactor? You have water, deionized, and copper. How is that happening? Well, if you look at the thing here, this is a broken one, and you can see the vortex hasn't unraveled itself. It's just a little like rolled up carpet in here. This is one showing the ovaries of the substructure internally. And I'll switch. Okay. I wanted to show you some other presentations. I think it's probably enough because people have a certain limit. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And if there's questions, I'll take them. But I really want to hear what you guys have got to say and be able to comment on those things. Well, we are literally looking at the root level access of how the universe works. And that's why it's so important that you're not allowed to be able to deploy this technology. Because it's 166 times more power than fusion. Why? Because if you take two deuterons and you fuse them, you get around about 6 MeV per atom, right? Per nucleon. If you take one proton and you turn that into energy, you get 938 million electron volts of energy. It's 160 plus times more energy than fusion. This is what Boyd Bushman was talking about when he said at nearing the end of his life in a video where he's talking about anti-gravity, the Hutchison effect, the neutrino-verse, and a energy technology that Lockheed Martin is working on that's way, way beyond fusion, that uses a different force that nobody considers. In one video, he tells you everything you need to know.
So Bob, first of all, I am completely overwhelmed, and thank you. And I think the major question that I would like to know if you could help us with is, at the end of the day, how can we manifest, circling back to the beginning, Moray, you're smiling. How can we manifest this, everything you've said, into reaching our mission of creating a 0-point energy device that we can safely deploy into public domain usage without destroying the cells of any human on Earth?
Right. Every time you have a spinning object, every time you use an arc welder, every time you're outside in a lightning storm, every time you're next to some sellotape being unwrapped, every time you're walking across a piece of synthetic floor, you're going to be exposed to the active structures, which are static electricity in various forms. You're going to be, this is ubiquitous, it's literally everywhere. What did Tesla do? He went to the desert and put up a large copper ball into the sky. What did Henry Murray do? He put up a big flat plate into the sky. It's all static electricity. You ask 1,000 PhD students or doctors in a room and you say, what is static electricity? And they'll start saying, oh, there's a bit of potential over here and a bit of potential and it discharges. No, what is static electricity? What is it? Because electrons aren't meant to hold together. How is that even possible? What?
So, yes.
So how do we manifest it? What do you want to do?
Yes.
So specifically answer your question. What do you want to do? Do you want health? Do you want propulsion? Do you want direct electricity? Do you want thermal? Do you want radiation remediation? Do you want teleportation?
Yes.
Do you want synthesis? Yes, you want all of the above. This is a huge blue ocean of opportunity. So you have to, I'm focusing on radiation remediation. It doesn't threaten anyone except for the people that want to pretend that this radioactive material needs to be stored at huge cost for the next billion years, right? those are the people that, you know, wouldn't like radiation remediation. I want to do it to facilitate, you know, and you can do radiation remediation by cavitation, by electrical discharge, by plasma. You can do it, and all of these methods work, right? They work. It's almost laughable.
I think what we'd like to do is make the world a better place for everybody, which includes the radioactive material remediation. but we've got
Basic
hunger,
ferrous
we've got
iron
energy.
material is the main thing that you can protect yourself with.
Say again.
Basic ferrous magnetic material. If you're stupidly rich, I'd wrap everything in gadolinium. Because gadolinium, basically these structures, the ones that they're all magnetic, right? But gadolinium has this incredible amount of barns for neutrons, okay, in terms of its interaction cross section. And when the thing is, these structures, they're not neutrons, but they're like big neutrons, right? And they weirdly interact with boron, with lithium, with cobalt, with indium. But gadolinium is your big money. Like if you're able to produce radioactive xenon, then that's okay. That's even better. But then it's radioactive. So gadolinium is the best. But iron is stupidly cheap. And then the second one is I'll show you a shield. I'll get one in a minute. Don't go anywhere.
An Iron Man suit.
There you go.
I have a question.
Well, let's let Bob respond before we move on and get away from the answer here.
You can see I built this from just cellophane and aluminium foil, and I have 7 sheets, and it's 1-inch polystyrene under there, and I have a grounding plate with washers, and I can put the grounding plate to ground, or I can charge it negatively, right? So what you want to do during the Soviet period, Anatoly Klimov, who developed the spike that goes out and enables their hypersonic missiles and stuff, and where you get 90% drag reduction when you get to hypersonic speeds, so it's very useful. But he was doing what's called erosive plasmatrons, and you have like let's say a magnetron that produces a lot of charge clusters inside. You've frozen up on me. Is that me dying here? Can you hear me? Ah, damn. Is my connection gone? Is your connection gone? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, you froze up.
You lost me for a second. Right, okay. I did pause what I was saying. Okay, so in the 70s and 80s, in the All Russian Plasma Physics Institute, they developed these things called erosion plasmatrons. They used a magnetron, let's say, to create a lot of charge clusters. Then they used a spark discharge to cause them to blow up, a bit like a PAP engine. And it goes through a small capillary tube, like, I don't know, some polymer. And it creates a vortex as it comes through. And it produces these spiral tracks, which can just go straight through Mach 2 airstreams as if they don't exist. Like, you know, they have a Mach Air 2 airstream and they're not deflected at all. But they will bounce off metal. But what they found is they will go through most things unless they got a mesh and they charged it to negatively 2,000 volts. And then they would stop dead, right? So you can ground these things like Pat did with his little wire to stop his engine blowing up before Feynman pulled it up and it destabilized the device. Or you can have a charged or grounded material. And it just works like lightning. Remember, these things are proto-lightning. They're lightning in a ball. They're ball lightning, right? So a ferrous material, a neutron moderator, and a charged metal or grounded metal. The last thing is carbon. Carbon is what they like to spit out most. This was a lead ball, larger volume than the inside of the lead ball, coming out mostly carbon. As I've shown you in our experiments, same thing. Okay, carbon, if it goes in, it comes out as carbon. These things get stopped by carbon. Now, carbon can interact with neutrons as well. It's part of why it's in a RBMK reactor. But it is this wonderful hexagonal structure. And the beautiful thing about hexagonal structure is it's playing to the root level axis of the universe, that when you get a 6-order structure, it is the flower of life. And the order of the structure is one of the most stable elements. And it down the line, it gives the properties of carbon. Okay, so this is why when you take Brown's gas or a Marsa gas and you mix in a very little bit of hydrocarbon, the properties completely change. They go from, for instance, like when we did the experiments with Roish and Amars, and he was saying, oh, the titanium is vaporizing and it's this temperature. And I think, yeah, you might say that, and everyone else might say that, but I'm going to actually get a bolometer and look at it. And it's like a few hundred degrees and it's vaporizing, right? It was actually transmuting, and I caught in a vacuum cleaner particles that were the same transmuted products as we saw on the tungsten, and it was smashing the tungsten apart as the metal was transmuting, and the volume of the product nuclei, when they became normal nuclei, was larger than the tungsten nuclei. So when they occurred under the surface, they would smash up the tungsten and create this white fuming vapor. Wasn't that? When you go through titanium sheet, it would punch a hole through. Interestingly, not a complete round hole, it was half a hole, always. Because of the magnetohydrodynamics that's occurring. It chops out one half and leaves the other side, but it leaves a ring structure on. Absolutely amazing to see it so quickly and do the same thing every time. But anyway, the point being is if you put a little bit, 10% of a hydrocarbon in there, the temperature was not well below 1,000 degrees punching a hole through. It was way, way higher, but not actually punching a hole through. And so it works completely differently when you add carbon. So you can also shield your devices having a layer of carbon. So there's many ways that you can understand about how to shield these things. Thin layers of alternating impedance material. So for instance, I'm using cellophane, aluminium, cellophane, and in between I've got air gaps. So as Ken Shoulders says, they don't like going through different impedance changes. They don't like going through impedance changes. So whatever device you make, you want to have impedance changes. Then if you're super rich, get some gadolinium sheet. Don't need it really, just a piece of iron will do.
Okay, well, we've got some people who have their hands raised, but I still haven't understood the answer to my original question. You've explained how to shield the device, but I'm still looking for the device to put the shield around to create the energy.
Okay, so critically, any
25 kilowatts.
Any impact on ordinary matter over 5 electron volts will cause production of energy solitons. It's 2,000 to 4,000 times easier to do it with hydrogen isotopes. The most ready form of hydrogen isotopes is water. Okay? Ball lightning occurs where there's almost always some water or some hydrogen. It basically does. Okay? And so water is the easiest path to get to this. Now, where are you going to get an impact from? Where in water, where you're going to cavitation will do it. Okay? And it's not the cavitation bubble itself that creates the magic. It's a second order effect from that. So it's an impact after the impact. And so essentially these structures themselves are can bind to magnetic or paramagnetic materials. What is the most available paramagnetic material in nature all around us?
Hydrogen.
No. It's not. It's not paramagnetic at all. It's oxygen.
Right. Okay.
Oxygen is uniquely paramagnetic. Uniquely. You can make hydrogen, atomic hydrogen or protons have a magnetic moment, but H2 doesn't. Okay? But oxygen, whether it's O3, O2, O minus, in every state, it is paramagnetic. It's something like 1,760 times more paramagnetic than atomic hydrogen. And that means you automatically have a magnetic thing around. Okay? Now you need to create your clusters. The clusters can bind to the magnetic oxygen. Okay? Now, how do you make the clusters? Well, in Chernobyl, it was radioactive material. Radioactive material caused these, like, give me an X-ray photon, or give me a helium particle, or a beta particle, or a gamma ray that's below 5 electron volts. And I'll say it's not really meaningful. Basically, any radioactive material will produce charge clusters. Okay, so Joseph Papp used two methodologies. He used radioactive material that was able to penetrate the pill that it was in to create the charge clusters. Okay, and they aggregated in his cell. He alternatively, when they complained about using radioactive material, he used a gliding arc discharge, which is over the 5e necessary to produce. Now, of course, he had a particular mixture of gases in there, and some of those gases will need much more than 5 eV in order to create the energy solitons, but they will do. And then those energy solitons aggregate into macro clusters, and then he detonated them, right? And because heat comes out one way and heat has to be pulled back in, you know, because it's condensation and decondensation process, it's a non-thermal process overall. But you have charged particles going up in a half magnetohydrodynamic toroidal cylinder head, and it produces a vortex, right? So out of the PAP device, for instance, you get massive amounts of magnetohydrodynamic produced power through induction that he dumped. You get physical kinetic movement because you have this cold explosion. It's cold because the electrons which are being clustered have to become ordinary electrons, and we've got this thing, you can go and look at our YouTube channel called what's it called, Evo Blaster, and where we're creating these clusters in a Vega experiment, and they're hitting the negatively charged cathode, which is the whole wall of the reactor, and they're blowing up, and they're producing a spherical explosion, and they all go out to the same radius like this, and they produce outside of the ion chamber, they produce on an AM radio tuned between stations, so you just get static noise. They give these little pops as they blow up because it's producing an EMP, a scalar wave that comes out. Okay, so what's happening in a PAP engine? They're blowing up because the electrons are going from cohered state, which when in that superconducting vortex down to the magnetic core, they're coming from that cohered state into ordinary electrons. They exhibit their Pauli exclusion principle, and they fly apart. So they produce that kinetic moment that can be imparted upon the cylinder. Of course, if you don't have the excess ones that are produced grounded, the charge clusters will go into the metal, and they'll cause, in the case of ferromagnetic material, they cause monopole buildup, which causes fracture. And in the aluminium, they cause it to turn to a gel, a fluid. And this is what Feynman said in his own account. He said this aluminium came out as a silvery. He said the silvery blob came out, and it burst into a puff of white smoke. Well, that's going from aluminium to fluidized aluminium to aluminium oxide. And so there are risks. You need to keep your devices grounded, but to a certain degree, you want to keep them charged up. You can literally charge up a piece of metal, as one of my colleagues did. Unfortunately, he died after the COVID jab. And it lit a 20-watt halogen light bulb for 30 minutes. It wasn't connected to anything. It was just the charge clusters flowing out of the metal into a piece of other metal through the bulb. It's quite amazing. So, yeah. So first,
Bob, I think what we're missing here, Bob, is you're grabbing the scalar field. This is what Matt is asking.
No, we're not missing that. No, I can show you one more slide.
We just need to emphasize that.
Yeah.
In this engine room, we potentiate the vacuum, counter-rotating torsion, right? Out comes the pointing vector, whatever you want to do with it, magnetically controlled. It is non-dissipative, it is non-radiative, and it's stable for a period of time. Anytime we potentiate the vacuum field with anything, with that kind of a differential, a gradient, we're going to spike the ZPE field. And out going to come the electricity. And so super tuning the space-time metric, warping space-time is what we need to do to create zero-point energy.
Okay,
and so that is really what we're getting at. How do we use the plasmoids?
Okay, but very simply,
the vacuum field?
What you're doing with this system is you're creating a permanently open and permanently falling Casimir cavity. What do I mean by that? Right, there's different wavelengths that can fit in your Casimir cavity. You've got a force that pulls from the outside; it can do work, but then you have to redo that work to push it out again. The difference in here is as the material goes into phase coherence, it becomes a condensate, and it's a condensate without limit. So matter is continuously moved in. So it's like a permanently closing thing. And what that does is so Shishkin, Karols, and Dubovik, they suggest that there's the basic quintessence, the basic superfluid condensate, universe-wide, of what they call relic neutrinos, which are a real thing. They're like 4 to 5 times the mass of all ordinary matter, plasma, and black holes that exist in the universe. Okay, they're part of the dark matter, and they are, in their view, an elementary LC dipole. As Feynman would say, there's always another Y, but we'll leave it there. That's their elementary unit, right? These cluster into various quantized levels, of which the actual electron is one of those, and then EVO is another one of those, right? But at a lower level, there's different quantizations, and these form the gel over which photons travel. Now, all relic neutrinos are able to do two things: interact with the weak force and gravity. Okay? Now, if you create a thing that has a toroidal moment, that can also speak to clusters of these things because they'll have a toroidal moment. So you basically have this vortex tornado that comes in, and as it's coming in, it's getting denser and denser and denser until it goes to a core, which increases the gravity until it starts to pull that material in, and at a certain point, it's pulling it in faster than the light can escape. So you get effectively what you could call is a black hole, because the medium over which light can travel is moving in faster than the light can move out. And it accelerates as it gets towards the phase singularity. So all of the photons that are traveling and all of that medium through which they can travel are being pulled into that core as well and energizing it. You understand? It's like it's constantly pulling in all of the photons through the medium over which they're able to travel.
Yeah, it's
and it keeps the thing
self-stabilizing,
spinning.
it's self-assembling. Yes.
And the reason I believe it only,
also,
the reason I believe it only lasts for 2 days is because as the Earth rotates round, you have a higher density of relic neutrinos because there's a neutrino sphere around the sun, the moon, and the Earth, and around all gravitational bodies. There's a higher density sun side than there is away from the sun. And these structures that we build in our space-time, our vacuum state, can only survive as an exotic vacuum object for 2 cycles without being fed more electrons or excited more. You give it more helicity, spin it more, electrodynamically or physically. And so that is essentially it. So you've got a constantly closing Casimir cavity. And it's basically, you set it up where I showed you several iterations, a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 structure that I captured on the outside of one of our experiments. Okay, I've seen many of different scales and different experiments. You can see them physically in nature as well at macro scales. Only when you have, on every level, there's always at least one feeding point, which is the vortex that comes into the core. Okay, there's always one feeding point. And so once you set up this structure, it for a period of time, whilst it's stable, will be able to suck the 0 point. It'll be able to suck freaking anything. I can literally show you it pulling a 20 micron slug of copper out of copper pipe. And around the outside of the vortex, you know, like you see a tornado, because they're the same thing, by the way. You can see ducks flying past a tornado just a few hundred meters away from where it's tearing stuff up. You see these pictures of tornadoes going over a solar farm, and there's a solar panel right next to it, and it's cut in half. You can see sometimes where there's a building, and one half of the building is completely untouched, and the bit next to it is completely destroyed. And you have to understand that the flux of relic neutrinos is what everything is breathing. And when you're throwing an intense flux through it, water boils at a much lower temperature. It's not boiling. You're breaking that weak hydrogen bond between the water molecules. And that scales up all the way to literally matter falling apart. As it's, if you want to know what I'm doing tomorrow, and probably don't, but anyway, I'm going to Italy on a research trip. I'm taking the family with me. It's my not usual excuse. I say, we're going this place, and they go, oh really, why? I'm going to go to Pompeii. Why am I going to Pompeii? Because the oldest Seta Rotas square is there, and it was before the earthquake, before the volcano erupted in 76 or whatever it was. There was an earthquake earlier than that. And at that time, there was a very large Jewish community living there. This is pre-Christian. I mean, Christ had only basically died. No one knew who he was anywhere. But they thought it was a Christian artifact, whatever. It's Sata Arepo Tenet, got it as whatever, Rotas. And it means, in my view, the divine creator from Alpha repeatedly to Omega comprehends and works with whirlwinds. And that is essentially what it is. The vortex is everything. In fact, the cold fusion community used to have a server where everyone used to communicate back in the beginning of cold fusion research, and it was called Vortex. I mean, it's hilarious. That is it. And that is your open tap to the 0 point, but it's literally anything. You can feed it anything at all, even nothing. And the other thing is because the thing over which light travels is this relic neutrino condensate. As this thing comes out, it comes out, and the bits come out in a golden ratio ejection, because that's the maximum packing density without wave interference. And it comes out and it pulls the relic neutrino condensate, which causes inertia and the mass build-up that sends you off to infinity if you couldn't move it out of the way. And it pulls it out and it feeds it up its arse. It feeds on the material it pulls out of the way in front of it. This is how these so-called UFOs can go faster. The faster they go, the faster they can go, because they are able to get more food the faster they can go. So, Matthew, to answer your question, for instance, cavitation is the best way to do it. The best system, like when I was putting a proposal together for the corrupt people that were supposedly going to allow people to bid for remediating the nuclear waste at Fukushima until they were removed, and now Mitsubishi are involved. They were called 9 Sigma. I applied to them. They changed the rules because we solved the problem. But anyway, they changed the rules. So they said, we don't want to get rid of the tritium. They said, we want to keep it or dump it at sea. They changed the rules. It was because we provided the solution. But when I spoke to Dr. Alexander Parkhomov of the Russian Academy of Science as a friend, and he said, why didn't you just use the Hydra wave system? And this is weird because it was so matter of fact. He was saying it like, oh, if you want to get rid of radiation, just use this. The Hydra wave system is this. Tungsten arc discharging with a water flow going through it. What does that produce? It produces atomic hydrogen, which can form into clusters with part of the arc still going, right? Those clusters can then bind to the paramagnetic oxygen states that are in the same water flow. Therefore, you have a rich amount of ready relic neutrino clusters, exotic vacuum objects bound to the carrier medium of the oxygen. This is this magic gas in Brown's gas, the bit that creates in the middle, right? When you get the bubbles, right? It binds to the oxygen in the middle. It's a special type of gas with all the energy and magic. Then it goes through into a stator, which is a big disk. And the disk has golden ratio reducing annular rings, or rings that go out and they go right, if you can imagine that, and it spins round, so you get all of the frequencies of cavitation as the water's going out, with the force, right? So you have it was designed to remediate nuclear and biological and chemical weapons, but by 2005 they'd run out of. Oh, you're frozen again. You froze again. I paused.
They censored him.
Yeah. It was designed to remediate chemical and biological weapons, so that you don't burn it into the atmosphere and release some of the toxins, basically. But they decided when they'd run out of things to destroy that they would try to see if Kladoff was correct, because in his work, Cavitation, Destruction of Matter, between 1998 and 2003, when he died, he found that you basically run a reactor for 350 hours and you produce 55 new elements from just water. And so, and also it's complete destruction of matter as well. So he did cesium-137, massive reduction in a very short cycle in the cavitator. So they tried it in their hydrowave technology. They tried strontium-90, yttrium-90. Both of these are beta isotopes, massive reduction in the radioactivity. And so it works. So when you are taking cesium-137, you're making decaying that. You are forcing a non-natural isotope change by hard wiring it. And that is, it's got all of the magic. It's got, and this is what Mars is doing when he's electrolyzing the water. When you're over 5 electron volts, you've got an impact that's over 5 electron volts. And then if you look at the videos that I have taken in 1991 to 1994 of Matsumoto, where he's doing cold fusion experiments, he's looking with a microscope at the electrode. And as it's doing electrolysis, you can see a bubble forming, and then it's collapsing, and then it produces a magnetohydrodynamic vortex coming off the electrode. Most cold fusion is actually HHO. It's basically HHO. And so really, I've probably talked far too much, and I would like to maybe just address some of the things. People had some different aspects that they wanted to talk about today that was in the...
Well,
I had a question.
let me please beg the indulgence of our group members, because I set an agenda up. We have a gentleman named Chris Bake with us, who has stayed on. I think you're still here, Chris. But Chris has been down the Stan Meyer water technology rabbit hole for 12 to 15 years. Chris, if you'd like to take the floor now, again, I apologize to those of you who have your hands raised. But based on everything Bob said, I'd like to be quiet and give the floor to Chris. Chris, are you here? Would you like to take the floor?
Oh, hey, Matt, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, thanks. So I didn't have a whole lot to add. I just put together some notes on kind of what, covering what we pretty much already talked about internally with the group, so that I could share with Bob. So if you wanted me to do that, I'm happy to. Otherwise, I didn't have any major updates otherwise.
Well, I think that would be great, because I think Bob mentioned many things that you've addressed in the past and would be interested in. So,
okay,
you got it.
I will try to get through this real quick. Hello, Bob. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, Chris. Pleasure.
As Matt mentioned, as Matt mentioned, I've been working on Stan Meyer's technology for about the last 10, 12, 15 years. Put together a big community that's growing, about some researchers doing it, going fully open source with everything.
Wonderful.
Just have some descriptions of a lot of the contributions that we've made over time. Is that we put together a large wiki. We transcribed all of Stan's materials. We indexed them all so that people can access them online in all different languages, and translated a lot of his patents from other countries that were in different languages, and put that all out there for people. We've done some significant work on modernizing his circuitry and producing 3D printed models, AutoCAD files for people to download and print and get machined out so that they could build some of the stuff. Done a lot of software development side too for Arduino, ESP32, complex waveform generators and different things, web-based softwares, massive circuit simulation and modeling engines that are available on the internet now that we can use to do some significant modeling of any electrical circuit, really, but specifically Stan's. And a lot of it does follow a lot of the stuff that you talked about. In the end, Stan was referencing people like Peter Grunow and Gary Johnson, specifically doing electrically induced explosions in water. But he did, most people don't know that he did have many, many other devices that approach different other areas of energy production, like superheating steam, up to including the atomic degaussing or accelerated reduction of radioactive half-life through the use of the hydrogen flame produced from the system. He talked about it as being like an electron reduction type of situation that reduced it. Anyway, so our core members have done a lot of contributions. We publish different books that are out there that people can purchase for just like $5 that have a lot of the circuit analysis of his whole complex computer systems that he built for controlling. Stan was in the retrofit business of converting an internal combustion engine also to run on water via spark plugs that he injected the water to, and caused that kinetic explosion event right at the tip of the injector and so on. So we've got a lot of stuff published out there on that, and models and STLs that people can download and produce. And all this work has allowed us to learn a whole lot of different things about what was really going on, because we didn't have a lot of the information provided in the documentation. But yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of it. All this stuff's out there. You can go to the website, which is stanslegacy.com. You'll be able to get to the different other places that we have for the calculators and so on. And just that we have a growing community of people from all over the world already. We've got people from Australia, New Zealand, a whole lot of them from Canada, Russia, Romania, Poland, Egypt, Ireland, Norway, and of course all across the United States.
So, in a brief summary, how would you understand that his process is working?
There's a couple stages of it. So it begins with the molecular alignment of the water molecule from the electronic fields, specifically a voltage only reaction with little to no current being used. Beyond that is the atomic elongation of covalent band orbits and so on to cause the weakening of the bond. But beyond, that's the first stage of his what you could call efficient electrolysis, right? Even though it has a bunch of out-of-the-box efficiencies conventional can't even compete with. Beyond that, there was a second phase to his production, which was particle oscillation as an energy generator. And he actually caused the ions created from the process to bounce back and forth between the cavity. And that impingement that was occurring with the molecules caused it to produce a geometrical yield of gas, almost a runaway gas production mix for very, very little power input. So that's the real crux of how his what you could consider the over unity side of what he was doing, because it took very little amount of energy to actually get to that point.
And in the teams that you've been working with, or the volunteers that you've been working with, where are they at in terms of observation of anomalous effects?
So that's a complex question because it is a lot of people from all over the place at varying levels of knowledge and entering into it. Obviously, we try to. I'm trying to educate people and teach them as they go too, so they're contributing back a little here and there. But we have a core group, like about 4 or 5, that have, we've produced his spec, a lot of his circuits and the cell designs and stuff like that. And personally, I've been able to. The goal has been to try and reach a significant voltage level across the cavity, under the circuit conditions, whether at resonance or in general. So I've been able personally to achieve about 1.4 kilovolts across the cavity, which is practically unheard of for almost anybody else. And with DC conventional, you can't get over about 2 volts given the 1/16 inch gap on there. So I've shown gas production. It's on the small scale, of course, but as I mentioned, there's out-of-the-box efficiencies such as the gas is 99% orthohydrogen as opposed to parahydrogen in conventional electrolysis. Plus, it doesn't corrode the electrodes, it doesn't require electrolyte, it doesn't require distilled water, and it can be done with high voltage and significant current, insignificant current. And so when you apply P equals I times R, or I squared R versus I times E, the Joule heating effect of it is significantly reduced because of the higher voltage versus the higher current in the conventional manner.
And have you measured how much above the Faraday limit you've been able to achieve in terms of gas production?
That's what I hope to do with the calculations. There's LPM, but that's not a great indicator because of the purity. The gas is about 8 times more pure than traditional. But we're doing modeling now, especially with a lot of these calculations based on Stan's math and based on known physics and stuff like that, to try and get to that point. It does appear that there's even a fraction, perhaps 25% of the process being endothermic, to where the cell continuously cools itself, like you mentioned in that other aspect. But no, so I don't have a ton of answers in that sense. We're still trying to get to that point. But like I said,
you're principally doing just electrolysis rather than the kind of laser versions or like a Marsa sound vibration system, other than the inherent sound of collapsing air bubbles that produce their own frequencies.
Right. Cavitation was necessary, or the vibration, to overcome the inefficiency of ion adsorption, the buildup of the double layer on the electrodes. A lot of people in the past used vibration and ultrasonic buzzers and stuff to do that. Stan didn't need that. He just basically applied a square waveform, shutting off the signal 50% of the time to allow those to be released. And then once that extended particle oscillation action was occurring, it wasn't even a concern in a sense.
Do you, I mean, you're aware of, you know, hexafluoride, hexavalent materials building up if you have chrome in there. That's quite dangerous, rather. Are you also doing like sandblast treatment of your electrodes or what?
No, no. Stan said the atomic infrastructure of the metal itself underwent a polarization. So he was literally remagnetizing 304 stainless steel long term. And the whole hexavalent chromium thing is, you know, potentially only applies to the high current chemical based version of DC electrolysis and not exactly his electrical polarization process, as he called it. Just more is similar to electron donation, perhaps, and the molecule just falls apart as opposed to, you know, the hot chemical reaction that could lead to hexavalent chromium.
Have you used any light stimulation to enhance the process?
Yeah, 660 nanometer photons aid both what Stan called that particle oscillation, but then they also help sustain at least 1 or 2 volt electron volt level on the ions or on the once they're split apart, and it helps to inhibit or impede hydration to momentarily interrupt hydration, which led to a higher charge building up because of the clustering of the ions.
What I gain off of to you related to what I was saying earlier is that oxygen, in my view, is a major carrier in this process. So, and one of the signatures that was very obvious to thousands of people near Chernobyl was in the city of Pripyat that was nearby, which had all the workers there. They witnessed these very, very odd glows in the sky. And the reason for that is that the oxygen that gets the topological monopoles, it changes the orbitals or for the electrons, so that when they're excited by the radioactive material, it produces different spectral emissions. And you get this during 3-body alignments in the work of Shuya and Ju. And we've observed it, like I've taken a Hutchison sample in Sochi, put it on a XRF detector or device, and on the outside you see normal materials, but a few millimeters or 1 or 2 millimeters into the center of the aluminium, most of the aluminium doesn't detect as any element on the periodic table, and that's, Ken Shoulders said these things live in metals indefinitely, where they're bound to the paramagnetic aluminium indefinitely in this case, because it was at one point it's reporting technetium, and that doesn't naturally exist, so like not for long. But anyway, so I would suggest that oxygen becomes more paramagnetic the cooler it is. So having your device cool is a good idea. And then secondly, I've suggested this to Binger and Huang and his cavitator. Why not consider having a low input energy PEM module, either just injecting the hydrogen oxygen directly in, or just injecting the oxygen in from you can buy these things for these hydrogen bottles. They're relatively cheap. You can get for like $20 $30 on Amazon, and just rip the unit out of there, and I think they dump the oxygen through a little hole on the outside, and they put the hydrogen into the water. Well, you want the opposite. You want the oxygen into the water and the hydrogen. And also try starting off by doing this process. If you boil water, because the partial pressure of nitrogen it's like 78% of natural air, and then you've got 21% oxygen. If you boil water or raise it and do it for a period of time, and then saturate that with oxygen rather than it being mostly nitrogen, you might find you get much better and more interesting results. The reason I say this is that John Bokris and Sundaresan at Texas A&M, they found when they were doing carbon arc discharges between water in, I think, 1994, 5, 6 or whatever, they found iron synthesized in relation to the excess heat, and they assumed it was carbon 12, oxygen 18 times 2 of each, and then it yielded 4 helium and iron 56, but they never measured the helium. But if you get oxygen and hydrogen fusing, you get oxygen 17 and 4 of those go together, and it gives you carbon 12 and iron 56, and it's almost exactly the same energy. The reason I'm saying this is that in that paper, they found that if they boiled the water and saturated the water with just nitrogen, i.e. zero oxygen content in the water, they saw no excess heat and they saw no synthesis of iron. But if they only when they had oxygen either naturally in there or they deliberately dissolved oxygen, so it was 100% oxygen in the water. So this is why I'm thinking oxygen is absolutely critical. And that's why I think a Mars system works better, because it's electrolyzing and it's vibrating. And so oxygen O2 is massively better than atomic oxygen or ozone in capturing the clusters. So you want oxygen in there. So this is what I'm saying. If you either deliberately oxygenate your water, having got rid of the nitrogen, and do an experiment, and or continuously saturate it with oxygen by having a PEM module in there, because they're very low power, and just see if that changes your data. That's what I can offer you today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's interesting, because it is pretty similar to something that Stan actually did. So he used what he called a gas processor. That was he had another cavity that was meant to have intake air come through it, and he was ionizing the ambient air coming in and stripping the electrons off of the oxygens, and then feeding that into the water mix along with recycled EGR gases, and that was his water fuel mix that went to the injector.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest it's the oxygen is better. He might have got an improvement, but just purely because he's producing charge clusters in that ionization process. It might not just be necessarily the addition of the gases. It might be the fact that they are charged gases coming in, and he's creating charge clusters as they're coming in. But I'm specifically saying literally adding oxygen, or making sure that the oxygen balance is much higher than the nitrogen balance. Oxygen, if you look at the paramagnetic nature of gases in the periodic table, oxygen is this surreal standout. Like, it's so high compared to anything else. In fact, you need to go way up the periodic table other than the normal ferromagnetic materials to get anything that's close. It's embarrassing that this has been overlooked for so long. I have to credit, I kind of realized it, but then I saw that Leonid Roetskev had talked about it, so like he thought about it before me, so let's give him credit.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
And Chris, yes, thank you again, and I thank the universe for having you join us, because if that didn't happen, you and Bob would have not gotten together today. So again, everything works together, and what I'd like to do next, Moray, you have your hand raised. I wanted to present my idea, which I think might blow up. Roy, I see your hand up. So let's take Moray first, and then we'll get to you, Roy. Moray, you're up.
Yeah. So well done, Bob. Inspired everybody as usual. And I knew we'd go down one hell of a rabbit hole with you. Way to lead us. So the suggestion I had, I meant to ask you this, is it's well known by everybody. You spray water into normal internal combustion engine, all of a sudden you have more power. And then they said, oh yeah, it's a stupid thing to do, because you wreck the piston, you wreck the cylinder, you have all these crater strikes. And I said, crater strikes? Have SEM, right? You have the SEM. So what if that's an important dot to connect? What if just wrecking a generator with the experiment, go ahead and spray the water, see you got more power. But the important thing is, what's in those craters? Do we get the EVO strikes, right?
So,
and that's an important dot to connect, right? That's the one piece of missing information.
Yeah, so to answer that question, to answer that question, we've recently, a partner has acquired the SEM, the MFMP has been diligently spending most of its donation money on over the last 3.5 years. the company in Prague that distributes. It's funny because the SEM is made in Brno. It's then sold by a Dutch company, and the distributors in Prague. And I was using their demonstration version, and they offered us a deal where we would get all of the money we spent for 3.5 years back, but we didn't have the money to spend the rest of it. Anyway, this group in Prague, Elia Foundation, they managed to raise some money based off experiments that we've done, and they now got that installed yesterday. And the reason that I was so passionate to take advantage of that opportunity was, of course, I helped Malcolm Bendel understand his technology. I predicted several things that would be inside his thunderstorm generator vortex anti-vortex system, and it turns out that they were predominantly the iron-rich crenellated microspheres were in there in a very large number, exactly where they should be. And so that was very exciting. But I'm very keen to know about what happens on the internals of the engine. Now, I've already mentioned that if you have carbon in play, these structures behave completely differently. And so you obviously have carbon in play with a hydrocarbon engine that has some water in the mix coming in some way. Now, so what I've done is I've got Roger, our colleague Roger, he's bought a thunderstorm conversion kit. Another company in Prague has done the conversion. That's now sitting at the Elia Foundation, and later this year we're going to do the test that I want to do, which is run it for a very short period of time and then look at the cylinder heads, exactly for this reason that you were talking about, because I suspect it won't be in there. Now, I think if you try and run something just on water, you will get it. For the reasons I'm saying, it behaves differently, because as soon as you start feeding a lot of carbon, it thermalizes it. It starts to lose its coherence, because carbon is diamagnetic and it cannot go into the core, but it can get close to the core, or if it's very powerful, it does get slammed into the core. But you can actually see on some of our experiments that the carbon is just orbiting around the overall electrodynamic structure. It's kind of attracted there because it's an ion, but it doesn't quite get in, as it were. And if it's synthesized, it gets orbiting around in the core, but it doesn't go into the core of the core. So I think carbon will prevent this to a degree. With regard to the thunderstorm generator, the way it's working, Malcolm believes that these plasmoids, that he calls them, are produced in the bubbler. Obviously, cavitation can do this. However, it seems to work without them. He says that's because it's being conditioned. I've argued since the beginning, and before I ever saw a device working, that it was something along the lines of the Armstrong electrostatic boiler effect. And if for those that are not aware, during the 1820s, early 1830s, there was up in Newcastle, there was a big steam boiler, and it sprung a leak. Specifically, part of the boiler cracked, and it was throwing these massive electrical discharges around. And this led the company Armstrong, and Armstrong basically kept the empire afloat. It made a lot of the weapons that we went around and ruled the seas and did our military adventures with when we were building up our prize pot to bail out Europe a couple of times. But anyway, yeah, so the Armstrong electrostatic boiler, you can see these in museums all over the place, and there's one actually in Siena, in Italy, and there's one actually in the engineering museum in Newcastle. And essentially what they have is they have a means of creating high heat. They have a boiler. The boiler produces supercritical water that then goes through a circuitous route that ends up by producing a lot of turbulence. It then goes through a capillary, and it comes out of the capillary through a wooden wooden nozzle, and the nozzle is set up to create cavitation pulses in the same way that the Russian Cavajet is used for mining. And it produces solitons that come out, and it's flashing to steam at a fantastically fast rate. So you've got all this pent-up energy producing a soliton, and then opposite these 5, let's say, soliton producing pulse nozzles, it has 5 electrodes which hit the center of the torus. And that is where the electrons cohere, whether you're creating them from this 5 eV disruption of the hydrogen or whatever. So I think what's happening is, when you get over 550 degrees centigrade and you have iron in play, you have thermocatalytic splitting of water. So you end up by producing oxygen and hydrogen and OH groups and stuff. That is fed into the reactor, And the reactor is cooled partly by this because the temperature that's coming out does this flashing of steam. And so you have several things. An engine will work better when it's running at a lower temperature. It'll also work better when it's at a higher pressure. That's the basis behind a turbo. And water does a couple of these things. When it goes in, it actually absorbs a lot of heat, converting to steam. And in the process, it actually creates a lot of pressure. So there's reasons why you'd get more power and so forth. And in fact, there are people out there that use water to clean the carbon off the inside of an engine because it seems to do this, and they don't really understand why. Because you will actually get charge clusters forming when the water is in the explosive setup or in the engine. So yeah, I do suspect it. And the reason I'm doing this study is not because Malcolm has asked me to. It's not because he necessarily wants me to. It's because I want to answer the question that's out there. Will this damage people's engines? Because it's okay when you're using $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 domestic, petrol generator. It's different when you've got a several $million dollar engine running a ship. The question is, do you run it? Do you start installing this on a ship so it produces nice, clean atmospheric emissions? You don't want that damage. I know Malcolm spent quite a long time with you, and he said a lot of good things about you. So I hope it works out.
Well, this wasn't about Malcolm. This is just a known thing across the community. The curious thing, the point of the question was, are we making EVOs as a result of spraying water in there?
Yes.
And will they do transmutations when you strike the piston?
Yes, in the absence of carbon.
We made EVOs, we made transmutation on the piston. We just connected a dot in science. So all of a sudden, what's the simplest way of manifesting excess energy? And if it's just spraying water, something that's well known, nobody connected the dots to EVOs. Right? They just criticized it. But if you have craters showing transmutation, you've now proven you have EVO strikes.
Yeah, in fact, we received a pre-1900 spark gap communication device in the estate of I'm going to refer him to him as a code name, Lion, Neil Crichton Gold, who did these experiments which were so transformative for a project. This device is so old, it has like a Rumikoff coil and a condenser below and so on. And it has 2 copper electrodes to create the spark gap. And it's insulated with cotton thread. So it's pretty old when it's got... I put that under the SEM, those 2 electrodes. So this is pre-1900, and they were replete with charge cluster impacts and transmutations. This is the oldest, this is long before Tesla was actually doing his experiments in this vein. And this is well before, this is transmutation in the 1800s, but brought up to the modern day. So anytime you're going to get charge separation with multi-axis hydrodynamic shear, you will produce charge clusters. In the absence of a hydrocarbon, like if you're trying to run an engine just on HHO, you will end up by damaging the metal. There's no way around it. There's no way around it.
Okay, so listen, what I'd like to do is recognize Roy, because you've been waiting patiently. And after that, I'd like to take about 5 minutes to explain to you, Bob, what I've been thinking about the last 2.5 years. And I promise it will be a short presentation. Roy, you're up.
Hi. My question relates to the statistics of the EVO production and energies as related to the atomic weights, because you seem to indicate that this happens a lot with carbon, iron, calcium, other things, silicon. What about pure protons? Atomic weight 1.
Yeah, so in the book, the 760-page book of S.V. Adamenko, he says that in the electronucleus nucleon macrocluster that forms at the center of these, whatever they are in his idea, you end up with basically, it's a electron quark gluon plasma. and periodically stable nuclei will reform in there, and logically speaking, the first most obvious stable nuclei that is actually the core of a basic atom is a proton. And so protons are produced in these systems. It's just typically we don't use systems that are able to detect protons when you're using SEM. But we're seeing that now in mass spectrometry when we do cavitation of water. But unfortunately, you've also got water. So like you can't say that the hydrogen's coming from the structure. It is most likely coming from the water. And of course, when you've got aluminium in there, you have this whole reaction with aluminium and you can produce lots of hydrogen.
So a pure aneutronic reaction involving solely protons, does that produce?
So
you know,
I have Piantelli in my head saying that the Coulomb barrier between protons is fantastically high, and that proton-proton fusion will never happen. But what he's missing the point is that these systems can cohere any matter, and when matter is converted into a quark gluon plasma, it has no nucleons. It is prima materia. So, for instance, when you get a sufficient magnetic strength, I think it's 10 to the 15 Tesla, which if you've got a system that can build a ring singularity that has a magnetic phase singularity where the magnetic in the magnetic core, where there is no end to the strength at which the magnetic core can reach. Okay, it's only a matter of time when you're consistently adding to the magnetic strength that magnetic core will exceed 10 to the 15 Tesla. In fact, when the baryon density is sufficiently high, you only need a 10 to the 11 Tesla. It still sounds like a lot, but we're talking about a very, very small area. But this is where all of the matter is focused as it goes through the flow in the system. When it gets there and you get over 10 to the 15 or down to 10 to the 11 if the density of the baryon is high enough, it will cause color disconfinement of the quarks in the baryons, the neutrons or the protons. Okay, and both a neutron and a proton has a magnetic moment, so it will be attracted to the core. There's a commentary made by John Kramer in 1983 that talks about when a proton meets a monopole, and it says it will catalyze the decay because the quarks will forget their identity. Anyway, when you pull a quark out of a proton or a neutron, it automatically has to synthesize an antiquark from the vacuum. So automatically you're getting, I mean, I don't want to get into all of the ways this can extract energy from the vacuum, but this is another way that it can supposedly extract energy from the vacuum. So this antiquark forms a meson, and that forms part of the quark gluon soup. And the quark gluon plasma is the most superfluid thing known to mainstream science, bar none, right? And it can produce, whilst the quark gluon plasma is of lower density than the actual nucleon bound quarks, it can produce far higher magnetic forces than an electron ion plasma. So the electron ion plasma, the EVO itself, is the bridge to forming a quark gluon plasma in the core. And it's when you get the quark gluon plasma in its own magnetohydrodynamic structure, which is a self-similar structure of the electrodynamic magnetohydrodynamic structure produced by the ions and the electrons, you get something, because it's superfluid, it keeps going. It doesn't stop. And this is why I'm saying these things last for a period of time. And when you try and do the maths to achieve 10 to the 15 Tesla in an electron quark gluon plasma, you get something that's just about 1 micron, which is the scale. This is what I was saying earlier about Ken Shoulders observing these things, and we observe them. When you look at an iron-rich crenellated sphere, all of the surface of that sphere, they're around about 1 micron. It's weird. Or this 1 micron figure comes up over and over and over again. It's around about 1 micron in different aspects of these structures. So it comes down to, it disassembles matter into quark gluon plasma, and when the electrodynamics of the macrostructure die, the electron ion that is maintaining the stability of the core, and the core itself then is open up to not the different space-time metrics inside the exotic vacuum object. Because, like, okay, I'll just say this: like, your normal space-time is what's outside the proton, right? Okay, inside the proton, it has a different space-time. It has a different, because it wouldn't be a thing. It wouldn't be a bubble in space-time if it was the same as everything outside, right? So when you create an exotic vacuum object, it also has a different space-time. It has it's a different vacuum energy state. It has a much different composition of 0-point photons, right?
Sure.
And so it's a different world. It's a different universe in there. All the rules of time and decay rates and everything change. And so when that overall structure that's maintaining that little bubble dies, the matter comes out, it hits our ordinary vacuum state, and it starts to create a wide range of elements, and protons are one of them.
Okay, my question, you've been answering all sorts of things outside of my question.
Oh, sorry.
I am trying to put electrons into protons very cheaply to make neutrons, thus to create deuterons, thus to combine deuterons to create helium, your standard basic fusion. And I'm not worrying about quarks or anything going on inside the protons or the neutrons. I'm interested in the basic fusion pathway. Does it make excessive EVOs and other stuff as a byproduct without any other heavier atomic weights involved?
Okay, so if you go, and I'll do it real time here. Can I share an image? I'll just show the process and then why it will be creating evos. Can I do that, Matthew? I need to share one page on the internet.
Absolutely. Do you have the you've
yeah,
shared before,
I'm just going to share a window. I'm just choosing which browser I want to use here. So let me choose. Too many windows up here.
Yeah, Roy has brought up an interesting question, because I think, Bob, you're saying you got to go to the quark level to vary the flavor and change the number of protons and neutrons. Roy's trying to do it from a higher level.
Yeah, I know, and that's what I'm going to address now. So let me see if I can share this window.
But I don't even believe in quarks.
I think that's where the secret is. This is what I think what Bob is saying. This EVO construction, that fabrication process creates potentially trillions of degrees, which is what's required to disassociate.
No. It's not creating any degrees. It's creating coherence.
Okay, and now you're going to use a ZPE to create that. You've got to drag that 0-point energy out, highly concentrated.
The 0-point energy just is raw energy. The raw energy might just be converted into more matter. We might be synthesizing more matter from photons. We're winding the photons into subatomic particles. We're synthesizing matter. Let me show what I'm doing here. So, if you go to what is it, Lena Academy.com. Okay.
Can we do that synthesis? Can we do that synthesis without tapping the Z field? That's the ultimate question.
Yeah. If I can remember it here. Right. So this is a online application you can use for free. That is a more advanced version, but it's got a couple of bugs of what's at nanosoft.co.nz. It was based on an application that I proposed based on Alexander Parkhomov's theory, but these are real nuclear equations. So if you want to go fusion reactions here, it downloads the database, so you can have, basically, once it's downloaded the database, you can have real-time nuclear reactions and work out what the energy of those are. So essentially what you're doing when you want to create a neutron in order to create a heavier element from protons is you want to take an antineutrino and an electron and basically merge those all into your proton to make a neutron. And so that is that just to make sure I've got what you're asking correct, Roy?
Well, yes, essentially.
Okay. So in the
I'm
case
not
of
dealing on the quark level or the constituents
yeah,
inside the
I'm not going
neutron.
to talk any quarks. We're going to keep away from the quarks. So, in Matsumoto's theory, he says that the electric field strength, or created by the itons, or rather from the clustered electrons, the bunched electrons, polarizes a proton, so that you get the emission of a positron and a neutrino, and you end up with a neutron being synthesized that way. Uh, that what is actually happening is the quark is changing flavor, but we'll forget that. We'll just say that. Are you happy to talk about positrons, Roy?
Yes.
Okay. Are you happy to talk about positrons?
Well, yes, because electrons and positrons are what make protons.
Okay. Yes. And so okay, so what we can do here is we can say like I'm going to do fusion reaction here. I'm going to put in a proton here, protium at 1H, and we're going to put a 1H here, and I'm not going to leave the output there, and it automatically calculates it. So proton plus a proton goes to a deuteron, and I need to, there we go. And it's producing energy of 1.44 MeV, and it requires a neutrino, in this case an antineutrino, to come in on the left-hand side of the equation. Now the thing is that this deuteron will be highly excited, and it doesn't have anything to share the energy with. So I can't see it happening on its own. You might need 4 of these to come together in a situation. It produces 2 deuterons that then fly away from each other. But this 1.44 MeV is far higher energy than is needed to create EVOs from any material. So not just hydrogen.
Well, including protons.
Whatever,
protons and
absolutely
neutrons.
everything. Yeah. So the energy is going to manifest in I guess that's the key reaction you're after. You're trying to produce deuterons. If I want to put in a deuteron here, you'll see what the reactions are. It's basically, it happens instantaneously. So you've got proton goes to deuteron, 1.44 MeV. Proton deuteron gives you tritium. Tritium is one of the interesting aspects of coherent energy transformations, or formerly called low energy nuclear reactions, formerly called cold fusion. That it produces tritium, and the reason is it produces tritium is because it doesn't like to produce radioactive elements, but if the structure that does the work breaks down before tritium becomes, say, 2 tritiums become lithium-6, the tritium escapes. So LENR will produce tritium, and it's known that when you do any form of cold fusion with light water or light hydrogen, it will produce tritium. And you can see Dr. Edmund Storms at ICCF 25 in Marioka actually talk about this. And then I go and at the end of his speech, I go and ask him, because he's saying that he believes that actually cold fusion, he's now accepted, is caused by electron clusters. And I go and ask him the question, what is causing, because I know several ways this can be answered. I say, Dr. Edmund Storms, you said that cold fusion is caused by electron clusters, but of course there's the Pauli exclusion principle. How do these electrons hold together? And Dr. Edmund Storms says, well, Ken Shoulders had one explanation. And that was wonderful, because I got Edmund Storms to give credit to Ken Shoulders. But he says that there's tritium. So you're going to get tritium out of this process. And Matsumoto observed tritium production with a nickel and hydrogen electrolysis in the early 1990s. So how are you achieving what you want to achieve? And by the way, it's leonard.academy, and you can have a look at this. And every link where you do something, it provides a link so that you can share it with other people so they can see the reaction. What was it? I'm going to stop sharing. Is that clear, Roy?
Well, yes.
You have 2 methods.
So,
One, there's 2 concepts. One, you can have an antineutrino fusing with an electron and a protium to produce a deuteron. The other idea is that you have there's 700 and something kV you need to put in if a electron is coming in with sufficient velocity, you can overcome the neutron formation barrier. So you need to put in that energy, but where are you getting that energy from?
We're looking at Ron Kovac's system, whereby he made lithium-5 stable out of nitrogen gas. And apparently he's basically going right around the Coulomb barrier, because he came up with all sorts of heavy elements, but specifically he had a nearly stable, and I'm saying many orders of magnitude above sub-nanosecond half-life, lithium-5, which John Bockris confirmed at Texas A&M. This all happened 30 years ago. I haven't heard anything about it, but I want to take his system, and instead of working with nitrogen gas, I want to work with hydrogen. And I want to create cheap neutrons, which should, with a little bit of magnetic confinement, which this system works by, be able to create deuterium. It seems a natural marriage of protons and neutrons to make deuterium. And deuterium very much likes to get together and make helium, the simplest reaction that there is. And I'm just after the heat. I'm not after anything but the heat, because boilers and turbines and electrical generators all have a high basic efficiency. I mean, okay, so turbines maybe 40%, electrical generators up to 65%. It's relatively high efficiency. If you've got heat to burn, you can make a lot of electricity very cheaply.
Okay, I mean, obviously lithium-5 has got a, less than 500 yatosecond half-life. So I wonder if what he was actually creating was
it's hard to argue with a mass spec, isn't it? I mean,
no, because you can
lithium,
this is what I'm saying is like, you can have molecules that can be misread depending on their ionization state. So like, what is a mass 5? Well, a mass 5 could also be DT.
I understand. And we discussed that.
As I said, you are definitely producing deuterium. You're definitely producing tritium. So you could have DT ion coming and presenting as a mass 5. And there's also Centilles magnicules, which are potentially possible depending.
When John Bockris and Guan Lin put one of Ron's research envelopes in their mass spec at Texas A&M, about something like 2 weeks after he ran it in his basement lab in Boulder, 2 weeks, it was mailed to him, presumably open to the air. They put heat to it inside their mass spec, and Guanglin observed that the mass 5 was boiling off in bursts, and it was coming.
Sorry, say what you said again. Say what you said again.
That Ron Kovac ran his system, and he found lithium-5 with a labeled residual gas analyzer he was using as a mass spec, and he could clean it out with helium. He could purge it. He could clean the tubes out. He could introduce new nitrogen, and he could come up with the mass 5 again, and also many other heavier isotopes that wouldn't be present in that tube. Now, so what happened is he sent the tube via mail, and then went down to Texas A&M, and John Bockris and Guan Lin put it in their brand new installed mass spec at Texas A&M, wrapped it in heat tape, and observed mass 5 coming out in bursts, boiling out in bursts is I think the actual quotation from that tube. So that would indicate at least a minimum of weeks half-life, not sub-nanosecond.
Okay, so I'm still not like DT would be mass 5, and DT is a hydrogen gas which can be trapped in metal, and when you heat it up, it can come out, and you know the tritium in the DT can last for 10 years or whatever it is. So I would expect to see it 10 years later as well. So I'm still not seeing anything that's going to make this 5 lithium. But to give credit, I want to say something separately. When we were looking at the reactor cores of neodymium and gold, we were observing the outside crust was basically copper oxide. But when we were hitting the electron beam on it, we saw these massive changes in detection to carbon. And it was showing all the elements it was observing, and then suddenly everything else was off the table, and it was showing 100% carbon. And what I think was happening is there was some residual exotic vacuum objects that were in the metal, and the electron beam at 15 keV was causing them to be disrupted and blow up and spill their carbon payload. And I wonder if something similar is going on in your system. I'm still not buying the 5 lithium. I'm still not buying the 5 lithium because I think it really can be DT. And so what was the fluid that is he starting with light water?
He's starting with pure nitrogen gas in a probably a fused silica tube. And he had electrodes in, originally neon sign electrodes, but in the tube that I have in my possession, they are the tiny pure iron wire electrodes, in the ends of the tube to create the plasma and add the electrons into his system. And his system was done inside a penning trap. Yes?
Yeah, I'm not hearing any hydrogen. I'm just wondering where you're getting your 5 lithium from.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He had nitrogen gas, and it was in a penning trap with 2 opposed north poles or south poles pulsing. So he was creating these counter-rotating vortexes, because when you have 2 like poles facing each other in a small volume, the electrical vectors in the magnetic fields were counter-rotating.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the Kovac mill. He was milling the nitrogen down and coming up with all sorts of exotic stuff, including fractional masses, and specifically a nice peak of mass 5. Now, if it was deuterium tritium gas, it would not have survived being open to the air and going down to Texas A&M and
no,
then
it could be trapped in the apparatus. I'll tell you why. I'll show you this. This is in Steps to the Discovery of Electronuclear Collapse.
Okay. I mean,
and it's from an experiment that was published in Fusion Technology on May the 6th, 1991. And he took his palladium electrode here, and this is the only time I've ever seen this done and publicly presented. Let's see, he says Big 5. Okay. The gas contained in the metal was analysed by mass spectrometry before and after the electrolysis experiment. Before the experiment, gas was discharged and keeping the palladium metal at 800 degrees C in vacuum for greater than 10 hours. So there was no gas trapped in the original material. So firstly, I'd want to know, was there any pre-extended... So because metals can trap gases for very long periods of time, indefinitely, Matsumoto used 800 degrees C for greater than 10 hours to degas, and normally you do it under a high vacuum. It's very, very difficult to remove anything from every single part of your apparatus, and you must really work hard to do that beforehand. Anyway, so they made sure he. Sorry, did he degas it?
He would purge the tubes.
Yeah, it's not
with
sufficient.
helium.
It's not sufficient. You need to take every aspect of the thing that can produce anything that could get trapped in the metal and degas
I
it.
admit that there were tiny pure iron electrodes in the ends of these tubes, which could have trapped gases in them.
Yeah, okay. So figure 5 shows a mass spec.
It doesn't seem reasonable that. I mean, it seems more reasonable that we would be looking at a lithium, a dilithium crystal, a metallic crystal, on the walls of the tube, as opposed to gases trapped in the little iron wires of the electrodes.
Well, in Matsumoto's, he heated up the wire, and you can see here, you can see mass 0, mass 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see a distinct peak there at mass 5. But of course, he's saying we've got lithium 6, helium, 3 helium, D3. So by showing that he's got D there, and that he's got OD, and that he's got OT, he's saying that mass 5 is DT. He's not even noting it, but he's observing that. And this was long after the experiment. He then heated up the electrode. Figure 5A shows the spectrum measured at 175 degrees centigrade whilst increasing the temperature. Several remarkable peaks can be seen in masses 2, 3, 4, and he skips 5 and says 6 because he knows 5 is DT. So I'd have to see the paper on this to understand why he thinks that a mass spectrometer is reporting a thing that should die in less than 500 yattoseconds.
Well, the paper, if you have access to the infinite energy database, one of his papers write-up was in, can you?
Yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Can you see?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
That page of the paper. Okay.
Yeah.
And he does provide the histograms, and he provides these are his labeled things where he purges and redoes, and then down below is what appeared on the Texas A&M after a week or two open to the air.
Can you lift it up? I'm missing that bit.
Postal Service.
Okay.
And then
Roy, you have to hold it up a little. We couldn't see the
bottom. Yeah, I could only see the top bar chart. Okay. So how much
hold it
of
up
that?
A little.
Yeah. Okay. So how much of that text is devoted to talking why that is not DT? I mean, that would be the single easiest and biggest question, and there should be a large piece of text in there that's explaining why it is not tritium, DT.
Well, we talked about this during the time that he was doing it. My memory is not all that good after 30 years, but we discussed the DT possibility. And there were reasons which I can't recall now, but seemed valid at the time and still seem valid, that he possibly was changing the constituents inside the proton or the neutron to create either a much stronger strong force or some other effect causing a more stable lithium-5. And
okay. It's funny because you started out by saying I don't want to know about quarks, and now you're saying his reason for this thing that should be DT is because there's something that's quarks.
Well, they're not quarks in there.
Whatever. Fish and bananas.
Proton is like 918 electrons and 918 positrons.
Right.
If you want to group them into things called quarks, fine.
Yeah. They're all,
But
and
the only
even the
stable
electrons,
particles,
even the electrons and positrons are based
the
with the
only
same
two
thing.
stable particles are the electron and the positron. And the proton is a composite particle composed of electrons and positrons. And if you want to group them into quarks and talk about all that stuff, these are all mathematical based theories, but we have to look at reality here. And
Well, the argument
whether
that
or
these
not,
subatomic particles have themselves subatomic or subparticle structures is also a mathematical argument. So, like, what is the point?
I mean,
Like,
nobody knows what an electron is.
are you trying to create heat? Or are you trying to create 5 lithium?
I'm trying to create heat from hydrogen fusion.
Right. I don't see the 5 lithium argument is even worth debating then, because it's just not part of the argument.
Well, no. I'm trying to get to the using his system instead of on nitrogen, using it with hydrogen to create cheap neutrons and do the standard basic fusion reaction to get heat.
Well, you don't need to debate about 5 lithium, because we know that various systems produce deuterium and tritium from a range of different approaches.
Fine, whatever it is, his system was doing something basically strange, and I think that we can harness it to get our energy source that'll drive our cars around and power our homes.
So what?
And we can get rid of the grid.
Describe again what the system would be that you're looking to produce the neutrons with.
Well, it was a version of the penning trap. It was 2 solenoids. I don't know if I can show you. This was his last experiment that he had. He was looking to create an electrostatic field across the 2 solenoids. In this bulb, there's I don't know if you can see it, there's a double loop inside the bulb. That's not a coil. Okay. It's a electrostatic terminal. This loop is tungsten or tempered iron wire. I don't know. That's soldered into the. You can see it here. The standard neon sign electrode. So basically, then he had 2. He built this, and it's pretty crude.
That's okay.
I didn't offer at the time, but he had 2 other electrodes that he could.
So, Roy and Bob, I'd still like to have a chance to.
Okay, sorry,
I'm going down the rabbit hole over here.
No, you should read his paper and see what you think. But basically,
if you can set it up so Matthew can send it to me, I'd appreciate that. I can't say
Roy,
that I can get to.
Yeah, Roy, why don't you send the paper to me in Telegram? I'll get it over to Bob.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have to work through FedEx. I don't have a good scanner, so it's kind of a crappy version, but it's on my finger drive.
Well, there might be a way for me to download it online. So let's so let's get together offline so I could have.
Okay, fine. No.
Thank you, Roy.
Basically, you've answered my question that there still would be EVs in such a simple system. So we would have to shield.
Yeah. You're not going to get away with that.
Yeah. Okay, so listen, I have a quick presentation that basically asks a question, Bob. I just want to know if there's any merit in this approach that I've been thinking about, or 2 questions: if there's any merit in it, and if it's potentially not safe, because what we've discussed today, it might be creating some events that would not be safe. So let me go here, and let me go here, and let me do this. And I'm thinking you can see this.
The Merkaba, yeah.
Okay, principles of creating controlled quantum energy phenomena for 0-point energy. And I've modified this presentation. I have to figure out how to get to the next slide.
There you go. I see it.
Okay, Back to the Future. Okay, experimental discovery. This is my 3-minute slide. So this is the concept that I'd like to present for you to think about. If we don't talk about it today, Bob, let's talk about it in the future. Use a single tetrahedral geometric configuration for the first set of experiments. At each of the 4 vertices, use an electrical discharge device, which yet has to be determined, to produce an abrupt electrical discharge directed at the centroid of the tetrahedron. Consider using a Marx generator to generate the discharge at each vertex, and laser beams also at those vertices that would be triggered at the precise moment of discharge in a water vapor atmosphere to create an ionization path to the centroid for the Marx generated discharge to follow. Variables needed to optimize to determine if quantum phenomena is generated at the centroid include dimensions of the tetrahedral construction to be used, power levels, voltage current of the Marx generator, power levels of the laser to be used, focusing that beam and the beam width, humidity and atmosphere of the environment, timing and aiming of the firing sequence of the discharge and laser beams, how to detect if any over unity event is generated.
Okay. So first question is, where's your counter electrode?
Say again?
The first question is, where's your counter electrode?
That needs to be determined, but there is I saw a video. Well, I guess the counter electrode could be on the other side of a sphere for each of the Marx generators at the 4 vertices, because you could do that with a tetrahedral configuration and still have room in the geometry to do that. But that would still have to be determined.
What would prevent each of the electrodes discharging to the adjacent spherically arranged counter electrode rather than going through the core?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, typically in a in a conduction path, which, assuming you've either got
to have 2 ends.
Hmm? Yeah, no, but like
you need to have
obviously
electrodes,
opposite a tetrahedron, if you've got a discharge, you're saying it will go through the center point. You've got a crossing point in the center. That's fine. But your counter electrode, if it's over here, this electrode's got a shorter path to discharge to there than it has to the other side of its counter electrode. So it's never going to go through the center.
Is there a way that you could think of where I could have an electrical discharge, like some kind of electrical discharge device, if we want to call it a spark plug, at each vertex of a tetrahedron to cause some kind of discharge to be focused towards the centroid?
Well, you would do a different type of discharge. You would you would use hydrodynamics, electrostatic charge, and you would have rings, and you would have the rings on the side, and they would be forcing the vectors through to the central point. But it's not really a discharge; it's a
You're
flow.
cutting in and out, Bob.
Sorry. Yeah, it's the place where I am. I've got limited internet when other people are in the building. So, kind of like a Farnsworth fuser is the closest thing that would point to a central point, and it's inertial electrostatic confinement. But it's not a discharge per se. You're forcing plasma to be confined by the hydrodynamics of the overall arrangement of the electrodes. A discharge is, you could maybe create an ionization channel using a laser, so that is, and do a reverse discharge. I don't know, like, so you see, if you're going to make an ionization channel into the center by having lasers, oh God. I mean, what are you trying to achieve with the bit in the center?
That's the question. What I'm trying to achieve there is the coincident intersection of those force vectors from the vertices of the tetrahedron converging at the same instant in time, potentially causing some type of black hole event because of the compression, and the force vectors would have that centroid at equilibrium at that moment in time, when those force vectors, if we want to call them, if you have a plasmoid that can, if you have 4 plasmoids that can be directed there, all converging at the same time, that's what my experiment would be to discover.
So I know visually where you're trying to go, at least I think I do. Essentially, what you're doing is what the National Ignition Facility is doing, where they have a fuel in a pellet and they're firing lasers from every side to do inertial confinement. Basically, you've got the energy vector coming in from all sides. In your case, it's 4. And the fuel pellets in the middle. As the fusion starts, it's trying to go outside, but the photonic pressure is pushing inside. So the temperature goes up and the reaction is confined. So the reaction probability goes up. And so, but you know, they spent many tens of billions, and even when they say that the energy out is over the actual laser energy in, the energy to produce the lasers used like 100 times more energy than the laser energy. So it's not really workable. Now, I think from the type of view of an exotic vacuum object and firing those towards each other, you're essentially describing something that's slightly akin to the Project Sherwood from 1948 of, you've frozen again. You're still there. Okay. You went still, and I didn't know whether it was. So basically, what they did is he had 2 little pills or more, up to 8 or whatever, and he had deuterated titanium, and he put 10,000 amps through those, and he flew those over a magnetic field to cause them to spin around in the center. Those were coming off, so that the rings were coming like that together, rather than coming together like that. When they're coming together like that, you have what helium fusion is doing, and they're creating 2 field reversed plasmoids, massive spheromax, and they're firing towards each other. And so their vector and the hydrodynamics and the vector that goes through the middle, it's the cores that are colliding there, which is better when you have just 2 than when you have 4, because 4 are going to be, they're not aligning properly. And the thing about a pulsed situation like this, it's much better to do a resonance situation. A pulse system, as I showed you early on, when you put a laser, for instance, to create a plasmoid in a nonlinear plasma, yes, you can get 1.36 thousand Teslas, you can get a lot of magic going on, But that is just a femtosecond laser pulse with extremely high energy in that femtosecond, which is going to be much higher energy relatively to anything you could reasonably produce per unit of time, even with very large Marx generators. So the reason lasers are good is because you can get a very large amount of energy into a very small time frame, and you don't have to worry about the counter electrode. You just have to worry about the target, and that's why they went down that route after the Russians showed them how. And so we're in it. I suggest two EVOs striking each other, and I mean the tetrahedron's a wonderful stable structure in nature, and I can see where the logic came from, but you're not considering how these structures actually like to form themselves. They don't have a thing that you can bend their will to your will. They like to form into structures that look like this. A vortex in one way and a vortex in. That's your pair, and that is why they launched two of these things against each other over a magnetic field from 1948 in Project Sherwood to create the fusion bomb energy for domestic energy. And yes, those two together create a much bigger vortex that goes into the center, and that is your center point that you're trying to create by your tetrahedron firing into the center point. It creates its own center point out of its own electrodynamics, and it's whatever you do, when you put a spark in, when you put a laser in, nature is always going to produce this. That's what it's going to produce, and you're just going to make its job harder or easier depending on how much you accept that this is how it works.
Okay, so I'm happy to accept how that works. I think what I would like to figure out, and it's probably not going to happen during this call, is how to use that and then be able to figure out how to capture the over unity energy that's produced and turn it into electricity.
Honestly, to be brutally honest, I think you're wasting your time. I don't think that idea, and I can understand where you're coming from, but I just don't think it'll fly. It is kind of like an initial idea that would lead you to the National Ignition Facility, and given the fact that they've piled in hundreds of billions probably in total effort into that since the 1960s, when it was demonstrated whenever it was in Russia, the basic principle, and they're still nowhere near achieving over unity. I think probably you'd be better off focusing on cavitation, because cavitation does this, or any resonant system, whether you're vibrating it with sound.
Bob, you froze when you said focus.
Oh, I would suggest you focus on cavitation and to understand the principles, get yourself a really nice Tibetan singing bowl and fill it up with water and go like that with it and watch what happens.
You get standing waves inside.
Yeah, but you also get things that leap out of the water, very high levels, and drop down, and then they don't go into the water.
Oh, right.
Some of them move around, and on the surface they move around, and some of them will merge into each other, but other ones will hit each other and they'll bounce away, right? And what you've got is, in the standing wave, you create yin-yangs. The yin-yangs create a hydrodynamic vortex, because it's a polar material. It creates a magnetohydrodynamic structure, and it's so powerful it'll punch through the surface tension, and it'll literally freaking anti-gravity up into the sky, more than any super wave would allow you to predict. And the thing is, when they come together, they bounce off each other if the vortex and the anti-vortex are opposite to each other. They repel each other. They move around. They propel themselves around the surface, feeding off the energy in the overall system. And then really think about that. Think about what's going on, and then think how you can make a system that will force these kind of structures to be stuck in a place. And what it is standing waves. Standing waves in water. Standing waves in metal. I mean, in Italy, they took a piece of metal and they vibrated it very strongly, and they get spots, and on the spots you get transmuted material. That's it. You're literally transmuting elements just by vibrating it and producing standing waves. And where those standing waves interfere, they call it space-time deformation. It's Cardone et al. You can go and see many pieces of research, but it forces coherence at those points. And what you're trying to think of is this shockwave approach, which is a good approach, because shockwaves have all kinds of magic going on in them, which is counterintuitive at the basic level, and smacking those things together. But it's still a pulsed system, and pulsed systems don't lend themselves very easily for extracting the energy, and they also are quite complicated. Whereas a resonance system, that's how our bodies work. That's how the universe, it works through resonance. And getting resonance, you can build, as Tesla thought. He saw a snowball rolling down a mountain, and if you don't lose the energy, but you keep accruing the energy, it can then vanquish anything. When he was a boy, and he understood that if I can use resonance to force energy into a particular point, I can do anything you can possibly imagine. And that's basically what I think you want to. That's why I call it coherent energy resonance. So. Coherent energy transformations, and it's not just it's propulsion, it's energy production, it's also sucking energy out of the environment if you want. It's synthesis, desynthesis, all of the above. So yeah, get yourself a singing bowl and sit by it and bang it and rotate it and whatever, and really understand what you're seeing.
I absolutely understand what you're saying, and I think the next level of experimentation with that is to get I've seen a video of this where you have a plate, you fill it up with maybe a 1/16 of an inch of water, okay, and you have a frequency generator hooked up to it, and you change the frequency, and you could see the different patterns of different standing waves as the frequency changes on that plate, and you see where the hills and valleys are, which is where it reinforces and where it doesn't reinforce, and that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. So yeah. I believe that's the concept you're talking about, and
all of these weapons are based on this, and it's just sad that it's being used for that. Honestly, it infuriates me.
Yeah. Well, I think my personal task is to figure out how to use that to get the energy out of it, not to weaponize it. So thank you for your inputs. Well taken and well received.
Like I say, I don't like anyone wasting their life, because we all only have a blip of time in this universe, and every single second it should be either eating, shitting, pissing, picking your nose, having sex, lying on the beach, making other people happy, hopefully being happy yourself. And if you've got any spare time left over, use it wisely in solving the world's energy problems.
Okay, and don't forget to take a shower once in a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Put that on your list, Bob. Okay, so listen, for our 2-hour meeting before we sign off, for our 2-hour meeting where we're at 3 hours and 10 minutes so far.
Sorry.
Is there anybody else? Oh, no, listen, it's not. I appreciate you hanging out with us, Bob. Not your fault. It's my fault. But is there anybody else who wants to say anything? Say anything before? Ray, yes, you're waving your hand. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think Astra was before me, but I was just going to say I'll fill in for Krasimir. I'll fill in for Krasimir in presenting his project, and I'll be quick.
Oh, we can't hear you, Ray. You're cut off. I see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, I was just saying I'll fill in for Krasimir, but I'm just saying I'm available when it comes to his section in the meeting.
Okay, well, listen, to go in order, we have Blake next. If you want to present anything, Blake, are you still here? I think Blake.
Ashtara has a hand up, Matt.
Yeah, well, we have the other teams. Ashtara, you've got something quick?
Yes.
Ray, why don't you? Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
Yes. Am I
Hi,
on?
Ashtar.
Yes, I am. Right. Ashtara. Anyway,
Hi,
thanks,
Ashtara.
Bob.
You've
Yeah,
got
we
the
did
most important
communicate some
symbol
time back.
around your neck, by the way. That is the symbol of how this
Indeed, I
works.
have.
So the Egyptian people believed all the hidden magic occurs below the Ankh's loop. The loop is the phase space of the fractal toroidal moment. And the arms
Got
go
it.
between the center of the toroid, and the thing goes to the bottom of the apple. It's the most important
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Yes, and with my past lives, I'm sure we've all done this before. We're all relearning Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Matt, yes, we are going back to the future in a divine way. I put something on from Stephen Halpern, The Great Pyramid, and it actually shows you what's called cymatics when he was there in the Great Pyramid, and it shows you doing the Om and the vibrations, of course, with the concentric patterns. Now, that was an awesome discussion and a talk, Bob. Your stuff you really have raised the level, and I can only congratulate you and thank you for your
It's my
service
honor, and thank
today.
you for your kind words. I've known I've had to do this since I was 7, so it's my duty. So
Absolutely. And are you sort of in West Sussex?
I
Or East
am
Sussex?
not at the moment. I'm going to be in Italy tomorrow if all goes well, and I can finish here at some point in the next 4 hours. But
usually is your home base East
I
Sussex?
am from time to time in West Sussex. Yes.
Oh, West Sussex. Okay, I knew it was close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I was there a few years ago with Al Putoff and Jean-Pierre Petit. So I was just dropping a few little cues in on the meeting about MHD. Jean-Pierre Petit. So he's very knowledgeable. So if you can anyone can connect with him, because that's the French
I would very much like
team.
to. Yes.
Yeah, he's getting on a little bit though, and his English is not fantastic. But there are people.
I
to
speak a little bit of
that.
French, so yeah.
Good. So Jean-Pierre Petit, he's been dealing with the Umo people, and back in the day, he was taken by the Umos. Divinely, don't get me wrong, there have been abductees, but these ones were, just monitoring, giving them a lot of downloads, as well with Andrei Sakharov. So they wondered why they were getting the same results, because both of them were actually looked after by these group of people, humanoids from the planet Umo, UMMO, and it is real, absolutely. So Roger Denekla has been involved in this. He wrote the book on the Umos. So have a look at that, because I do feel you'll
pick
a lot of cues on. And this little beauty, I came into my being recently about ours, how to run your car on 0 point energy. So it's called the Joe phenomenon. I think this guy's Australian.
Is that the Joe cell? It's like a type of HHO electrical, like electrolyzer.
Yeah, I feel so. Yeah, it's
like those concentric cylinder jobs. Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. So the book is
the great thing about concentric cylinders that are offset is you have all of the frequencies. Yeah.
So he's talking about inserting these in your car, and I know this was done in February 1998 at the Research and Development Engineering. So it's called Hilton Dynamics Limited. I feel he's Australian. I might be wrong on that one. Nevertheless, he has devised a number of addendums, to fit inside your. Do you remember? This is going back in the day, Bob. British Leyland vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah, and Fords.
I went up to their old factory, and it's just a supermarket now.
Yeah, that's the one.
You can still get Leyland trucks in India, though. They're just made there.
Oh.
Yeah. So guys, if we could get on to Ray now, that would be great.
Thanks, Ashtara.
Thank you, Bob, and I'm sure we'll communicate again.
Okay, great. Okay, Ray, you're up.
Okay, brilliant. I've just messaged Krasimir. Hopefully he'll jump back on, because he's the builder and the experimenter from what I'm about to present. So I'm just doing it in his absence, really. So give me a sec. Let me present my screen. I think it's that one. Hopefully you can see that okay.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, brilliant. So yeah, here's just a quick overview of Krasimir's space-time antenna. So pictured here, this is the device he built.
It's
it consists of a beautiful fractal Stravinsky gasket at the center.
There's a very large one of those outside one of the university buildings here in Brno where I'm sat, and it's for ending. It has the 3 world wars. Sorry, First World War, Second World War, and the end of totalitarianism on it, and how everything fractally entwines. But anyway, this is good. You've got what's going on with the copper spheres there?
Yeah, let me explain. So yeah, the idea is to create these nested spheres or nested capacitors of certain volume and certain proportions and shape, and certain certain mathematical fractal ratios. And in Krasimir's case, he's done it in nested spherical shells.
It looks like you've got a golden ratio between the inner one, the middle one, and the outer one.
Yeah, so I believe the size of the spheres is the golden ratio. I think the distances, I haven't confirmed that with Krasimir, but it looks like it. The shell should be thin enough to vibrate. That was quite key as well. I believe you can use probably a different material there. I think it was said that gold would be the best, but that would be too expensive. But the idea is to eventually immerse these shells or these capacitors in certain mediums. And in Krasimir's case, he says, well, sound can be the medium. So he's using sound. So we'll find that each capacitor, let me just read it. And we'll find that each capacitor on a different scale would pick up certain frequencies. So by introducing a frequency, these would then resonate on a different frequency or the same frequency, and they might do weird stuff. So on a different scale, they'll pick up certain frequencies, and within that medium, they then release that energy in a certain way, going through the different nested capacitors to sort of transform it into something usable, such as electricity for us. So yeah, that's what's pictured there. It's this device you see here, it would have as you see the bottom half of the shells there, it would also have the top of those as well to make a sphere. So this would be the transmuter getting the energy and the sender of that energy. And the other part I'll show you, and then I think in the next slide or the one after, is the flash matrix, which will be the receiver of the energy. Okay, this was just 2 slides of showing the shells.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Okay, thin enough to vibrate. He says it's not just electrical energy, it's mechanical resonance as well, so that makes sense with the vibration. If built correctly, supposedly, we might not need any input at all. That was another point. But initially, it said the device was supposed to be kickstarted with a pulse or something like that. So that's the space-time antenna, and this, what you're seeing on the screen now, is the flash matrix, and this would be like the device that would be somewhere else that will pick up that energy, probably exactly like a Tesla coil. And in the center there, he's got that I've forgotten what it's called, but he's got that beautiful sort of pattern, and that runs through the center, and he's got it going both ways. And there was something specific about why you needed it both ways as well, but I've since forgotten. But let me just read through the notes. So
one's a vortex and the other one's an anti-vortex, and it basically looks like the head of a sunflower, which has got the golden ratio embedded into it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this device, he said it's designed to build and release a charge thousands and millions of times a second. And then it converts it into useful DC output, of which he has demonstrated, but he's not getting much output at the moment. Counter-rotating Fibonacci spirals, that was the word. Insulating plates across the horizontal center, and then he's got a quartz crystal directly in the center.
Well,
again,
Fibonacci tends to the golden ratio, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, I might have got my words mixed up.
No, it tends to after a while.
Oh. And then at the moment, he's rebuilding it at the moment to make it more precise, because the energy he was getting out wasn't to his liking. So he's been rebuilding it and polishing it and all of that kind of stuff. So that's his rebuild process. And now I won't show the video because it'll be too long on this call is quite long. But now what he's doing is he's trying to go for better results, basically more output than before, because he can get more voltage out. I think it was something like that. And ideally, it should, in the ideal world, it should just meet any demand, but I'm not sure how that would work. Krasimir said that it's supposed to be initially a spark to make it sort of get into the resonant state, but then he's clarified that no, it needs a constant energy to it. So that was pretty much the presentation. I just wondered if you had any insights. I'll try my best to answer your questions, but really,
yeah, I mean, as I said a couple of weeks back in the start of this presentation, my own fault. Nikola Tesla used a copper sphere above his desert outpost, way up into the sky. It's one of the best ways to capture charge clusters. Charge clusters can be moved by photons, and so it's a good idea to get out into the sun and get a few when you can, because you're not just getting the photons, you're getting the charge clusters being transported by the photons. There was a very famous alchemist who went into the deserts of Mexico and used a copper bowl, and he put water in there and he left it out into the sun for a period of time, and then he used that water in his transmutation processes, and it's only using that water was he able to do the transmutation into gold, which was essayed, and the king got involved or something like that. It was all very interesting. But essentially, as I said earlier, water is able to dissolve oxygen. Oxygen is able to capture these things. Copper is a reflector. Copper is diamagnetic. So the reason that Matsumoto here used copper, he very specifically says it, is it cannot absorb hydrogen, but it does act as an electrode. It is very good. It's obviously one of the most conductive elements. And so these clusters, it's an ideal thing to aggregate these clusters as a conductor, rather than the diamagnetic nature in its relationship to hydrogen. So yeah, I mean, obviously copper, I think copper is probably the best material to use, given the history of these things. I think, you know, the properties of silver are that it's more conductive and that it is the problem with silver is it's a lot more expensive, and then gold obviously is much more expensive than that, but it's less conductive. But all silver, copper, and gold are all diamagnetic, whereas aluminium might actually be a very good material to use. The problem is it does get oxidized to a higher degree. So in terms of the metal choice, I think he's got the right metal. In terms of the use of the Fibonacci, which, as I said, tends to, as I understand it, the golden ratio ultimately. I think it's an interesting idea. It's obviously out there. You do see these kind of things, like as I said, his I think you said a receiver is a sunflower. One could argue, what does a sunflower do? Well, it points itself to the sun. That's why it's called a sunflower. Not just that it looks like a sun, it literally wakes up from sleep, looks at the sun and tracks the sun all day. Have you ever seen stop motion on a sunflower field? Now, why would it be doing that? Because each of the tips of the seeds is like an antenna. It's receiving energy. And so the idea that I don't know where he's got that idea from, but that each of those seeds are designed to fit within that pattern and are point focuses pointing at the sun. And what are they trying to produce? They're trying to produce condensed information and energy in the form of the kernels of the sunflower seeds. So as a receiver, I think it's a very good conceptual idea as a receiver. I'm not so sure about the Chapinski or whatever it is thing in the center there. I'd like to understand his logic more about that. I understand that you get fractal antennas these days for both transmission and receiving, and maybe he's getting it from that. That could be a concept of why he's going there. So he's looking at that as the energy receiver. And if he's got golden ratio, which it looked like, it looked like the internal volume was golden ratio to the gap, and the gap to the outside was golden ratio. And as I said early on in my speech, the way these apple structures form, that I showed you in the cavitation system, is the reason you use golden ratio, because it's the closest packing density you can get without having wave interference, which means you're most efficiently doing it without destroying the system that you're trying to create, if you know what I mean. And so it's a thing of creation. So as a harvesting, I'm just riffing on what you've showed me. As a harvesting technology, it's something that's been used historically. The antenna for receiving the energy is something that exists in nature. Now, he's looking at the gaps as the receiver. I would actually reconfigure that so that you actually had those shapes, but probably in some form of conductor, maybe even copper again, but with insulators. So where he's actually got the wire mesh as copper conductors, I would actually have that as an insulator supporting a load of antennas that are receiving the energy. So because I'm just thinking, because nature already has the answer, we just need to know what it did and what. We know why it did it, because it's this structure, but we need to know. We don't fight it. It's already showing you the optimum solution. Like those sunflowers are the optimum solution, right? For the local environment they're in, given their opportunities to maximize their genetic potential. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. When you said he's achieved some power, I mean, I would expect you can get power from any metal in the atmosphere because it's going to collect these things. And a copper sphere, well, that's definitely going to collect these things. I mean, Henry Murray, we've got Maury B. King in here. I know he likes that riff. Henry Murray collected the charged clusters from the sky, came down, and then he blew them up in a series of amplifying triodes or cells with it, in additionally radioactive samples that produce charged clusters themselves. So you've got a charged cluster coming in, you're feeding it into the system, and then you're blowing it up with radioactivity. And each one of those is going to release 10 to the 11 electrons, and that is going to then cascade through the process. So I would suggest that he's created a very pretty piece of art installation that will create measurable voltages. I suggest that you don't even need the transmitter and accumulator. I suggest that focusing on the sunflower shape and making that a receiver of energy, it might even be better than Tesla's sphere. I wouldn't dismiss the fact that you got spheres within spheres, because that is, whatever the sounds are, that's going to create some sort of resonance is going on. There's a device that we tested a long time ago for separating water. It was called the Davy cell, and effectively it was two hemispheres that had a gap between them, and you put them in water and electrolyzed it, and the water actually caused cavitation. That produced sound, and then it produced vastly more water cavitation. And it's a bit like the Joe cell, but it's kind of like a sphere rather than concentric tubes. So I think it's interesting. What's the overall goal other than creating power that's useful?
For the information you asked, where did it come from? It was channeled by Bashar. It's like a spiritual channeler and he channels information. But he came out with this experiment that people could do, and he said, "Get experimenting." And then he's basically taken that idea and he's ran with it, and he's had lots of private sessions with him, and he's developed it, and that's kind of where it's at the moment. But yeah. Sorry, what was your question?
Well, again, other than I think it's energy generation, isn't it, or harvesting?
Yes. Yeah.
I honestly, and I don't mean to be rude or abrupt, but the best thing is probably to plant some sunflower seeds and burn the oil. You've probably, I don't know, I'm absolutely brutal sometimes. Nature has already solved the problem. And you could spend 20 or 30 years and that you might solve the entire problem in 10 minutes. And it might be only 10 minutes in that 20, 30 years that you've solved the whole problem. But you as I said to Matthew, look what nature is doing in that singing bowl. In this case, I would say, look what nature is doing in that sunflower. Get a sunflower that is ripe, or even plant yourself some sunflowers and watch them develop. Watch how they are growing and watch how the seeds form. Do stop motion on them, because I think your device will work better if you track the sun.
Okay, interesting.
The receiver. Just do what the sunflower does, because these things, I'll give you the reason precisely why. I analysed some material that came out of work that was done by a guy called Kovacs, Zatelepin, and two Russians, Zatelepin and his colleague, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name right now. They had a spark discharge in a hydrogen or water atmosphere in a glass tube. They then had a glass optical fibre running around that tube. They then passed a 5 milliwatt laser through that, and they passed the end of that 5 milliwatt laser into a chamber that was filled with CO2. Okay? Right? They discharged the spark in that water-filled or hydrogen-filled atmosphere, passing the light through that tube into that chamber, and under the path of the laser, like it was spraying out of a hose, they saw a white deposit on a microscope slide at the bottom. They sent me that that deposit, and it was rich in aluminium, like 20-30% aluminium. There's no aluminium in there. Now, what is that? CO2 fuses normally to silicon, but if you want to get a reaction that actually produces two particles, it's fusion and fission. It's 2-to-2 reaction. CO fuse, fission to aluminium and hydrogen. There's your hydrogen out of nowhere, right? And what am I telling you? This proved that the energy clusters can be transported by light. Firstly, it proves that they're neutral as they go through the glass of the wall, through the air, into the optical fiber. It then produces the coherent wave train of photons in the laser is moving those clusters on the standing waves, but it's a traveling standing wave into the chamber, and those clusters are able to capture CO2 and fuse that to aluminium and hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, so that means that we know for certain that these things can be moved by light. That's why the sunflower is tracking the sky. That's why I'm saying it. I'm not saying it's not guesswork. I'm saying there's a very precise reason I'm giving that advice.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'll relay that to President. I'm sure I've probably done him a disservice with explaining it, but thank you very much.
No, I think you did very well. I mean, it speaks for itself, actually. Yeah. Thank you, Ray, for your contribution.
Okay. And Ray, thank you so much for covering for Krasimir and honoring my request to have his spectacular work included. Because it's beautiful stuff, independent of its ability to really produce 25 kilowatts or 50 kilowatts to power a home. So if there's, I think it's probably time to release Bob from your 2-hour commitment that turned into 3 hours and 35 minutes. when we started 2 weeks ago, per your comment a few minutes ago.
It's about how long I had a breakfast conversation with Murray the last time I was with him, or the time before the last time.
Time evaporated, just like now.
It was great,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thanks for teleporting us all.
Yes, yes. Well,
it's a pleasure.
So
Robert.
I think every time
Hi,
I make
Thomas.
the offer for anybody else to speak, Tom, are you okay if we, Bob, would you come back sometime?
Yeah, why not? The point of why I
Excellent.
exist is to make sure anything that's possible gets delivered. I don't want to be clearing up someone else's archive again. My friend that died the day before yesterday, he made a massive contribution to the field, but there are all these people that oh, my precious, or for some reason things don't get delivered, and we can collectively deliver something because everyone here has, they've thought about this for a long time, and everyone might have one piece of the puzzle. And it's only through dialogue that we can learn how to put the whole picture together. And that's why I think yes, my answer is a yes. Yes,
Okay,
I would
great.
like to come
Well,
back.
thank you so much. I think it's time to go now. So just one more thing, my usual farewell. Live long and prosper. Bob, let me see it. Both hands. Both
Oh,
hands,
that's
Bob.
mean. I can't do it with my. Oh, there we go. Oh,
Okay, listen.
it hurts on my
Okay,
right hand
Bob.
because I damaged this one.
Okay, Bob, I got to show you the progression. You see both hands?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you move your ears though? I can do that, and I can move them independently. Yeah.
Okay, next time.
Practice your ear
showing
wiggles. It's my alien heritage. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh God, I let that
Yes.
slip.
Lots of talent here. I see that.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody-
Bob, before you go, I want you to
what's that?
think about something if you can.
Oh, I
Till
don't
next
think at
time.
all.
Variable reluctance switching generator. Put that in your brain.
Variable reluctance. Switching generator.
Switching generator.
Okay. Beep.
Okay.
Wait, Star Trek is real. Star Trek is real.
We could do it. Do you think, are you talking
It
about
is
Floyd
real.
Sweet's magnetic device?
No,
Well,
did you not
something
pick up
similar.
the cue?
This is more generic. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, an automation engineer. So this is my electronics coming out, and so I think it's doable. But I wanted to bounce it off you. But we can do it next time.
All right. Well, just to
Star
close
Trek
out,
is-
and I know you've already done your Star Trek, but I think absolutely every aspect of Floyd Sweet device can be explained by exotic vacuum objects. Absolutely. And down to resonance and formation and so forth. All of the phenomena, the anti-gravity aspects, trivial. All of his observations, the so-called perception of immense sound, all kinds of things, really. And the failure modes, the reason why it failed. It can all be. Another time. Let's do that another time.
So let me ask real quick, Bob, you want to do it 4 weeks from today? Would that make sense? 1 month from now?
Oh God, I have to look at the calendar. I'm absolutely chocker. So I'm not going to say yes now. I can't.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's get together offline. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Cheers, Matthew. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Maury, Chip, Ashtara, Ray, Christopher, Thomas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Madel.